We are live.
Based in Red Hill.
Hello and welcome everyone. Tonight's stream we have Alex from the Transhumania YouTube channel. And we're going to be talking about the strangeness of our world. But specifically the strangeness.
Hello and welcome everyone.
The strangeness of being a human being. What's that experience like? And all the weird things about being a human being. And everything about strangeness. It just occurred to me. This would be a good topic. So what do you think about, what are some strange things about being a human being? Alex, what do you think?
I think one strange thing about being a human is our perception of time. Because this might be like a very strange opinion to have, but I don't think time is necessarily real in the sense that we think it's in like a physical sense, not in a perceptive sense. In a perceptive sense, it definitely feels real enough, right? It's just a question of
right
of whether that's reflected in the actual laws of physics, which it not necessarily is.
Right, like one of the strange things about time that I can think of is how older individuals will say that time goes by faster for them. Like their perception of time, it's like they have less time in a day. They've so much the day gone by and they feel like, where's my time go? It just went by so fast. Or they look back in the last few years and it seems like it was just like a few months, like they're just losing time so quickly. It's all about the perception. What do you think?
I think that can be explained away with like basic neuroscience, in the sense that old people, when you're a baby, you have more neural potential, so to speak, as in your brain cells. They haven't formed their connections yet. They haven't formed any synaptic connections. It's just a clump of brain cells. And then when you're a baby, the neurons start responding to stimulus, right? And the electrical stimulus forms pathways. And the older you get, the more and more pathways you form, and then the more and more potential pathways disappear. And then once you're in like your 20s, like say me, you're left with very few pathways. And then those get stronger and stronger as you get older. And I think that's why older people tend to be more conservative, more like reactionary, more settled in their ways. Let's say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and it's not because of the dog; it's because of their brain connections.
Right. Absolutely, but they have less brain plasticity, right?
Well, it's not that they have yeah, I would say that, but it's also the fact that the stimulus they've put the kind of the way they've situated themselves is done in a way that sort of repeats those synaptic connections, so that like their daily routines become more and more mundane, and that's why time seems to go by quicker for them than it does for us. If you do the same thing every day, I think that would coincide with this perception of time slowing down. Whereas if you add novelty to your life, I think it would be enriching in the sense that you would feel you had more time on this earth, even though you didn't.
Right. Novelty would be things like...
There's a difference between your actual age, your biological age, and what I like to call your psychological age.
Right. So novelty would be things like not swimming, like doing something. Well, it could be swimming for someone who's never swam, right? To something that's different than your ordinary, something new, learning a language, learning a instrument, right?
Learn something
that you've never
done. Something very enlightening every day. That's what I try to do, or try to learn, like something you didn't know about history or philosophy or politics or something that you didn't know from yesterday. It keeps the novelty alive, even though you're stuck in this coronavirus outbreak and you have to stay at home all the time.
Right, and perhaps one of the biggest novelty things they could do, which should lead us into our next topic of strangeness, is like a novel, like changing their thoughts in such a way, maybe with like some kind of mind-altering substance, right?
Yeah.
That's a novel thing that would help people with Alzheimer's, because their brain is just stuck on these neural pathways that have just been formed, and probably certain of these psychedelic drugs or whatever could help their brain switch over to new networks and like more like a childlike mind where you're seeing things through new eyes. And
I could definitely relate to that. If you guys have done drugs, comment in the comment section and we'll respond to that. But I would agree that, like, let's say LSD, for example, does make you feel kind of like a kid again. I feel like just very mundane things like the wall, the sky, the rug, were new perceptions for me when I was on certain kind of substances that shall not be named because of YouTube demonetization. You know, but it really
Right.
speaks to the strangeness of the human mind, but also the strangeness of reality itself. Because when you're a child, you have this humongous neural potentiality, and the way in which you're situated in history and geographically can impact that so much. And then once you're old, you can't undo that. It's like the potentiality becomes actuality. It becomes actualized, but not as in like a self-improvement sense. It becomes actualized in a physical sense. And Deleuze, the philosopher, wrote about this a lot. He called it the actual and the virtual, in the sense he doesn't believe time actually passes. He thinks time is always there, which is very interesting when it comes to like life extension and stuff, right? Because are dead people really dead? What would you think?
I think dead people are really dead.
As in disintegrated into nothing and will never be retrieved.
Yes. 100%.
That's
Yeah.
one possible view to take. Deleuze, though, he doesn't believe in time per se, like not time as we recognize it. What he calls the actual and the virtual is sort of like the actual is an emergent property of the virtual. So think of instead of thinking of time as a line where you have the past, the present, and the future in this line, think of it as kind of like a sphere, maybe. The past is the center of the sphere, and the present is the outer layer of the sphere, and the future has yet to be actualized in the like furthest outward reaches of the sphere. It doesn't mean the inner layers of the sphere have disappeared. For instance, let's take the example of like a cell, like a bacterium, and a DNA molecule. The DNA molecule is virtual and becomes actualized in the organism, but you don't see the DNA molecule. You do see the organism. So I think there's some very interesting ways to think about time, and Deleuze took these ideas from Bergson, who famously debated Einstein over the nature of time. And they had some very interesting exchanges about how it works and how we perceive it. Because I don't think it would be very evolutionary and advantageous to have a species that perceives time as moving in both directions. I think it would be better for evolution if you perceive it in one direction, because that way,
right. So the species could communicate with each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it depends on which direction you're perceiving it, though. Because what if you want to perceive it going backwards instead of forwards? And this goes back to like Plato and Aristotle, right? So both Plato and Aristotle believed in gods. Plato believed in the demiurge, the forward god. God is pure potentiality and creates like humanity, and that goes forward to become something. Whereas Aristotle thought of it as actuality. The God is at the end of time, pulling things toward it. So it's very interesting how these two individuals had a very different way of conceptualizing of the same thing. In fact, Aristotle. You ever heard the term entelechy?
No. But you know what? Something is saying, so YouTube is giving me a message that says YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming.
Oh, yeah.
Such as
sometimes
viewers will experience buffering. I'm almost like wondering how bad it is. I kind of want to see how bad this
Your
is.
audio skipped one
If
time.
it's bad,
Your audio skipped one time, but it wasn't that bad. Go ahead.
well, I just
let's take...
I wonder how this would sound to the audience. Like, I want to like open up this video right now because there's no one to tell us. So let's watch our own video to maintain smooth streaming.
Oh yeah.
I will show us watching our own video right now.
Let's do it.
Let's
do it.
We're gonna watch our own video, and I'll put it in right here. This is us watching. Oh wait, I put it in the wrong place. Okay. This is us watching our own video. Let's watch our own video to maintain smooth streaming.
Oh yeah.
I will show us watching our own video right now.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Doesn't seem to be skipping that much.
Our own video. Yeah, it seems to be. And I'll put it in right here. Seems to be okay, this right? Is us watching.
Relatively.
Oh, wait, I put it in the wrong place. You're watching it too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I saw it's an emergent property of the virtual. So think of it instead of thinking of time as a
wait, just quiet for just one
line.
second. I want to see if it's
where
not crazy.
You have the past, the present, and the future in this line. Think of it as kind of famously debated Einstein over the nature of time.
You're right. It seems to be fine. You're right. Anyways, we forgot to we'll get right back to your point.
Oh yeah,
but
we're talking about experiences of reality.
Wait, before we do, let's kind of promote Max Eternal Life's channel.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because I told him I would next stream. I have it here on the screen, so everyone, go subscribe to Max Eternal Life. He doesn't have very many subscribers right now, but we're gonna build his channel together, and expect good things from him. You know, me and Alex are both friends with Max, and he's a big Eternal Life fan, enthusiast of living forever. So go in there and make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, click all, Max Eternal Life. I helped him make his logo there. Make America Live Forever. That's kind of the...
It's a catchy logo.
I love that slogan. All right. So yes, go over there and subscribe. Link is in the description right now. That's good. You have anything to say about that to help promote Max's channel?
Yeah, so he hasn't made any videos yet, but we've made podcasts with him. So those will probably be showing up on his channel, so you guys could watch those. Like fucking exclusive content for whoever does go to his channel.
Yes. All right. Wonderful. I guess we'll get back to what you were saying.
Okay, so we were talking about like potentiality and actuality. So Plato and Aristotle were these two philosophers who lived like 2,500 years ago, and like Plato was taught by Socrates, and then he in turn taught Aristotle, but like he didn't agree with Plato a lot, so they had some like back and forths. Essentially, Plato believed that there was this ideal of world of forms, and this world was a fake world shaped as a derivative of that world, and in a sense, it was made from pure potentiality. And meanwhile, Aristotle, he took like the reverse view. He said God is not at the beginning of time, God is at the end of time, and he's pulling things toward it. And he called that entelechy. And when we got to like Darwin and evolution, it's like it was kind of discredited, right? Because we all know in evolution things move forward, things evolve to become greater than themselves, rather than they evolve deterministically. Whereas Aristotle, he believed in what's called a final cause, as in the teleology, like the meaning of a thing, is what God is molding it towards the end of time. And I think like probably my two biggest influences, Julian Huxley and Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, they took like very opposing views. Huxley was kind of an evolutionist. He kind of synthesized Darwin's evolution with like the idea of genetics, and he's like, well, we have this potentiality and we evolve out of this potentiality. Whereas Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he believed in this thing called the omega point, which is at the end of the universe will kind of collapse. Like if you've ever heard like the big crunch theory of physics, it'll kind of collapse, and that like infinite energy of a universe collapsing can be used to do infinite computations. And what is infinite computation other than God? So he actually believes in Aristotle's entelechy, like the idea that we're being pulled towards this final cause. So it's kind of like the reverse of evolution, except instead of something at the beginning of time causing evolution, it's something at the end of time that causes evolution. I think that's one very strange way of looking at time, two different perspectives of how time is supposed to work, and how our perception of it is supposed to work. But yeah, there's definitely neurological components, and you could take various substances that shall not be named to sort of mold your perception of reality, maybe reconfigure some of those neural pathways.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking to me before in other streams about how future technology will be allow us to completely empathize with each other. Because I think that's one of the strange things right now, is that all these other human beings out there. And how many times have you had the thought? I just had this thought. I just think this all the time. Like, there's all these other people. And it's like I can never truly know what it's like to be them in their mind, and how their difficulties and their challenges and just how much struggle they're dealing with. Because it's like all of us deal with completely different. We have different minds that are creating different amounts of neurochemicals. Some of us are creating way more neurochemicals that would completely make it easier for us to deal with certain situations. Another person might have very few of those chemicals, and they go crazy because they're not getting enough like anti-stress in their life and different things, right? So people's brains. So that to me is one of the strangest things about being a human. Is just not. We try to empathize with each other as best we can, but it's like we can never really 100% know. And I think like maybe even certain psychedelic drugs or whatever, or like you said, future technologies could allow us to better empathize. I think that would be so cool.
I think there's plenty of examples of that. Like one example is like this might kind of sound like sexist, but like it directly relates to like whether or not you have balls, in the sense that like your nuts, like your gonads, they make a hormone called testosterone, and when you're thrown in, like when a man is thrown into like the heat of battle, the testosterone is able to mitigate the cortisol. And women actually produce testosterone too, but they produce it in their adrenal glands. And the problem with that is it runs out very quickly. So, like Israel, right? Like the Israeli commandos, when they trained like female commandos, and they were thrown.
Heck,
Yeah.
I know. Of course, I know it Israel. I am a big fan of
When they
Israel.
threw the
Why
female,
do I do this every time? You shouldn't do this when you're saying you're a fan of Israel.
wow, that's like a
I'm
whole new
definitely.
brand of enlightened centrism. Heil Israel. Yeah. Anyway, when they threw the female commandos into battle, like they kind of broke down crying and they dropped all their weapons and ran away. So it's a sense of like being in that moment had them deplete their testosterone really quick, whereas the men had this like huge reserve of it. So it's not like a social phenomenon or anything. It's just sometimes like biology makes us unable to empathize with others and have the same life experiences they do. And like this is
Right.
where the expression,
Just as
this,
the
yeah, this
with
is where the,
women and men, right? That's or boys. They say boys are from Mars, men are from Mars, women are from
yeah, because like
Venus.
when the
So
male,
we have completely
yeah, when
alien
the male
minds.
Israeli commandos were thrown into battle, they did just fine. Like they kept their cool. They were able to stay like calm and calculating. And it's not because of the women. Women had like inferior character. It was purely chemical in this sense. The expression like whether or not you have balls, like it takes balls to do this, balls to do that. That's very literal. It's a very literal expression that relates to the
Yeah,
mitigation of cortisol by testosterone.
absolutely. And yeah, one of the things. Actually, let's talk. That could lead us down a rabbit hole. There's so many ways that people are different, right? I mean, that leads you to gender. It leads you to
But yeah, but you
everything.
what you were talking about was like
Um,
brain chemicals, not necessarily endocrine chemicals. Yeah. So
yeah,
serotonin.
like why does like what's always fascinated to me is like some people's brains, they're like they call them the ADHD brain, right? And some people are the autistic, they're on the spectrum and like they have trouble reading social cues, and there's like thousands of different psychological illnesses or whatever. In fact, maybe it's even wrong to call them illnesses because like Greta Thunberg, she calls her autism a superpower. So it's like we're calling these things illnesses, but actually sometimes they could be like secret blessings. They can be give the people superpowers. So, and
Exactly.
there's introverted and extroverted. You say you're extremely introverted, and to some people that might sound like, oh, a disability or whatever, a handicap, but you probably see it as a huge asset that is helping you and has led you through life and become this knowledge seeker and the seeker for truth because you've had so much extra time because you're not being this extroverted person. So
Absolutely. I
there's
would say it
benefits,
gave
right?
me extra time, but I wouldn't say like mental illness is the right term to call it. Like, because I have a lot of problems with the term mental illness because it calls into question there's a hint of biological determinism in there, and this is not the kind of biological determinism like we were talking about the Israeli commandos earlier. This is a lot of mental illnesses are actually social. Have you ever heard the term schizoanalysis? So
Uh-uh.
schizoanalysis, it was developed as kind of like an opposing psychological framework to psychoanalysis, which is like Sigmund Freud, right? You sit on the couch and you fucking talk about your dreams and shit, and then he diagnoses you with a fucking mental illness and locks you in an asylum. Schizoanalysis is like the inverse of that. It says, oh wait, what if like this disorder you're feeling is actually the way in which you're situated socially or economically, and let's see if we can get at the root of that, and then put you into a different framework where the illness can disappear. Um, and that's essentially it goes back to like Foucault challenging the idea of mental illness, because back in the days of the ancient Greeks, mentally ill people like schizophrenic people, autistic people, like maybe OCD people, the Greeks called these people touched by the gods, a term that literally referred to them as gifted. Whereas we lock them in buildings. We lock this is what Foucault wrote in his book. It's called Madness and Civilization, and he wrote about how like throughout history the way in which we treat non-neurotypical patients has evolved. or should I say de-evolved, because we treat them increasingly worse as society progresses. Because at first they were just at first they were treated as like divine beings.
Wait. You're saying we treat them increasingly
Yep,
worse as society
I would say
progresses? Wait. I thought we're going in the opposite direction because a while back we
electroshock
had,
therapy.
we were electrical therapy. We were lobotomizing people. I saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Watch
Oh,
that
I've seen
movie,
it.
by the
It's
way, everyone.
that's
That's
a good
an
movie.
amazing movie. Love it. One of my favorite classics. So, it seems to me like we're getting a little
Well, what I would
better.
say is,
I mean, we're still bad because we're like overdosing people on like lithium pills and just all this bull crap that's gonna mess up their brains. But it's like we're doing a little better than we used to, right?
I would actually, I can understand your perspective, but I'm going to take a very contrarian position here and say that it's not getting better; it's actually getting worse. Because when we look at the Greeks, they were treated as if they had some kind of special gift that made them the way they were, and people didn't try to change you. They're like, oh, okay, that's just the way they are. They just do these things. Let them find their niche in society. Let them find a way to be situated in this society where they can sort of go along and get along, find their unique roles as a human being. And then throughout the Middle Ages, it kind of devolved into social alienation, disassociating, witch burning. The witch burning was pretty bad. A lot of them were just like mentally ill women, or like spinsters who didn't have husbands, and they became the scapegoats for supernatural events, which they either got lynched or burned. And then we get
Wow.
to like the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It gets even worse, where they actually go after you and drag you back to a prison where you'll probably get like raped, beaten up, or like injected with drugs, or abused by the doctors and patients, sometimes by the other inmates. The electroshock therapy, all that horror. And I'd say while the punishments haven't gotten worse, the classifications certainly have. There's a lot of things nowadays that are considered mental illnesses that wouldn't have been considered mental illnesses. Let's talk about toxic
Right.
masculinity, for instance. Masculinity
Oh
is
yeah.
I can understand what they mean by toxic masculinity in the sense that it's like what it's usually in the academic sense. It means like a man who is using his gender role, like idealizing his gender role to become like more violent just because it's specified in the gender role. But that definition's kind of changed, and nowadays they sort of define masculinity itself as a mental disorder. For example, in the DSLR, they listed masculinity as a mental disorder, but they didn't list any of these like toxic things like rape, violence, or whatever. Instead, they listed things like stoicism, like being stoic as a man, like deliberately emotionless, is a mental disorder now. Being like ADD, hyperactive,
Wow.
that wasn't a mental disorder in the days of the cuckoo's nest. It is now, though. What is it? Like one in three
Wow.
people who have ADD or ADHD? That's not a mental
Can't be
disorder.
emotional, and you can't be as a man. You can't be emotional, and you can't be
Exactly.
emotionless. Where do you go with that?
That's why I say it's getting worse. More and more things are being classified as mental illnesses.
Right. And now it's like they're probably their net for who is a mentally ill,
It's
right? It's just
expanding.
big,
It's
bigger,
expanding more and more.
and so they're just more people are getting drugged, even with these antipsychotic drugs, and then they get totally addicted to them, and then they're stuck on them for life because the withdrawals of those drugs are freaking horrendous,
Especially
right?
the ones they give to men for being like toxically masculine, like Ritalin. Ritalin's actually it's not a derivative of meth, but it still does like a similar level of brain damage, and we don't give a shit because whatever makes them concentrate, whatever makes them sit down, is what they should get. And women don't have the same problem. Women, like girls, are usually like calmer during class, so it's predominantly men who get hit with this ADD bullshit, which goes to show it might be an illness of society rather than an illness of the mind or an illness of biology. Because if one in three men or one in three boys are ADD, is it really a mental disorder? Like really, or is that just like sort of slightly less neurotypical? Because 30% is a lot of people. Holy shit! Do you think we should be casting
Yes.
this net of mental illness over that many people? I think
No.
there's definitely a profit motive involved here. There's big pharma shit involved here. But again, like I said, we got to use this weapon of schizoanalysis to fight psychoanalysis. Essentially, using sociology, economics, um, just analyzing people's situation in the like socially, geopolitically, to determine the cause of their mental illness. And I think Foucault blamed a lot of that on the way in which schools were structured. So he compared the structure of schools to prisons, factories, barracks for soldiers. He claimed a lot of the mental illness was maybe an origin of the way society was structured, rather than illness of the mind.
Yes.
And he thinks we should restructure our schools.
Yes, 100%. Oh my gosh. And I've often thought that, like, think about how many times in life you felt a little depressed or whatever, but you know that in a completely different environment, that depression would be gone. So it is an environmental thing. It's not like, oh, if you take a pill to solve your depression, you've just like somehow numbed your ability to feel the discomfort of your situation. It doesn't actually doesn't fix the thing. So all mental illness seems to be like, or maybe most of it, not all, but a lot of it is just like, put the person in a different environment and they'll probably not be mentally ill anymore. Like, it's a simple
Some of it, I would say, is even a hybrid of social and biological. For instance, we mentioned depression earlier. Maybe it's a hybrid of a lack of vitamin D, but that lack of vitamin D also comes from society being situated in this, like perhaps a cubicle or an industrial building or an Amazon warehouse where you're not allowed to go outside. And by the time you're done your shift, it's already nighttime. That could be a source of depression. That's one example where society and biology come together to fuck you. And the classification of that as a mental disorder doesn't help either, because now this depressed person who was only depressed because they work at Amazon and they can't go outside and they can't get vitamin D is now being given SSRIs that'll fuck with their head, fuck with their like neural development, and perhaps even kill them, like premature death. There's a lot of these effects of these drugs that we don't yet understand. And the only people who benefit from this are like soy boy psychologists who like to call everything a fucking mental disorder. Amazon, of course, Jeff Bezos, and the big pharma. These are the only winners in this game, and the rest of us are losers. So we really need to like restructure what we mean by a mental illness. We need to redefine it.
Heck yes, and this is where I think the actual Scientologists, like I don't agree with a lot of their religion, but they're like actually a lot right when it comes to their thoughts about the psychiatric industry and how toxic it is and how it's so bad it messes people up probably way more than it actually fixes people. But there can be, I mean, I'm not denying that in a certain instance, if someone were to, they could maybe it saved people in certain cases, right? They had to take something, they were so depressed, and whatever SSRI they took or whatever, it made it so they didn't kill themselves. I'm sure there are instances where psychiatric medicines have actually helped save people.
Oh, for sure.
It's just it's totally messing with people in a bad way.
In some instances, there's a very clear biological cause between what's fucking with your head and, like, let's say if you were taking fucking mercury, obviously we'd know that the mercury, like the Mad Hatters from the Victorian era, where they put mercury in the hats and it fucked with people's heads. There's obviously a very clear cause and effect relationship in that situation. But once you get to something like autism, it gets a lot more complicated. Are they really autistic? What do you mean by autistic? They say it's a spectrum, but they don't clearly define that spectrum. Were you ever on it? Did you ever get tested? I got put on it. I didn't get put on like PDD, which is like the really hardcore autism, more like the Asperger's side. Did you ever get like some kind of?
I never got tested for autism. You got tested for autism, and you got on the spectrum.
Yeah, very light on the spectrum, not that bad. Supposedly, but I mean, if you like go back in history, nobody would have even given a shit that I was like slightly weirder than normal. They'd be like, oh yeah, some people are just like that.
Right. Now, explain what your brain is like with autism. How does that make you different? I mean, I wouldn't say you have autism. I'm not saying that. I'm saying like your little minor diagnosis. What is that supposed to do to your brain?
It's supposed to do to your brain. Autism, there's a variety of characteristics, and here's again my question: the categorization, because not all people show that list of characteristics. Like for instance, you're supposed to be like one common stereotype of autistic people is they're supposed to be like socially inept, like maybe socially introverted. I would say I fall into that a little bit. Not cynical. Like for instance, the most openly well recognized stereotype I can probably dream up is Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory. That's like the stereotype of like what an autistic person is. They're like very cynical. They're very calculating. They're very rude to people. They're like unintentionally like racist and sexist. and you kind of feel that you're supposed to like feel bad for them because they're all like I don't know, weird or whatever. They're not like a normal person. They're supposed to act like a robot, like, you know, Commander Data from Star Trek.
Uh-huh.
But I think the amount of people we sort of put into this category don't fall remotely even close to that. I'd say, like, for me, it's just the introversion and maybe a little bit of the cynicism, but none of the other stereotypes.
Right.
And there's also the cause and effect relationship, right? So maybe after telling me that, like, I'm autistic, I start behaving more like the stereotype. So you confuse the cause.
The placebo effect.
Exactly. The same might be happening for like people of color or like marginalized groups or women or whatever. You tell them that they're supposed to be conform to a specific stereotype, and they're like, oh, okay, well, that's just me. So then they start doing the stereotype, and then you don't know if it was the stereotype that caused it, or if they were like that.
Or their subconscious mind hears that they're this way, and then not even consciously they're trying to do it, but their subconscious is like programmed them to be a certain way based upon what they're always told that they are. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's a good word for it. Self-fulfilling prophecy. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like these kids or whatever who had parents that say, oh, you're never going to amount to anything, you're a piece of crap, whatever. They get this instilled, and it becomes their program. It becomes what they manifest in their life because it's like what they truly believe is their destiny.
Exactly. So,
it's horrible.
Like Foucault, he blamed a lot of this on like the fact that we over-categorize things, and we don't have like sufficient justification for that categorization. And he inspired a little bit of like Deleuze as well, who also kind of said we should organize things like rhizomatically rather than arborescently. Arborescently means like you have kind of like a hierarchical organizational structure. So let's say you have like the root of a tree, and then you have branches, and then you have leaves. That's what we call an arborescent structure. Whereas like let's say couch grass or like potatoes or like roots or fungi, that it doesn't have a structure. It just goes wherever it goes, and it connects to other parts of the structure. You can't really predict it. It's in a sense, what you could say is it allows for more mathematical permutations, and therefore allows for more creativity. And when we build AIs, like when we get into transhumanism and AIs, which structure do we want to use to build the algorithm's brain? Do we want to use an arborescent structure or a rhizomatic structure? And here's where the shit about computers like really gets interesting, is because the depictions we see of like robots in sci-fi, right? They're very kind of like rigid, let's say. They don't understand certain things. They're not very flexible. Sometimes it's either an on or off relationship. There's no nuance in the way that they act. And a lot of this is due to the way that computers think. So the way that computers think, they don't think like this at all. Computers have a central processing unit, right? And if that central processing unit gets damaged even slightly, then the entire robot becomes like fucking disabled. It doesn't understand. It doesn't function properly. Whereas with humans, if I hit you on the head with a hammer and you just woke up, maybe got a little concussion, I would not have destroyed Rowan, because Rowan's cognition is decentralized. Your cognition is decentralized to each individual neuron. Whereas with a computer, it's all hierarchically organized. If you cut down the root of the tree, the whole tree falls. That's the problem with the arborescent structure, is it's vulnerable, it's fragile. Whereas the rhizomatic structure, which is your brain, it has a characteristic we call the asignifying rupture. So asignifying rupture means that, like, let's say I did brain surgery on Rowan and took out half his brain, you would still be able to function, because your brain is a rhizome. It'll start up from the parts that aren't broken. Let's say I took out your amygdala. Yes. You'll still survive, but you probably won't have fear of anything. Maybe you'll get a new amygdala just from the pure fucking neuroplasticity of living so long without an amygdala. Who knows? That's why the brain, I wouldn't say the brain is a complete rhizome, but it is more rhizomatic than the way we structure our computers. So what
yes, it's like a mushroom, like a mushroom mycelia. Like mycelia, it's like you cut off one chunk and this mushroom's still
exactly
alive.
So fungi would be a good example of like a rhizome. But another example is the way in which we use language. So is language arborescent, or is it a rhizome? Because we've been led to think that language is hierarchically organized as well, right? Like you have a root, which is like the very simple words like the, and, is, but. You have the prefixes like pre, post, add, x, n, whatever, those prefixes, and then you add more complex words like a tree. But is it really like that? So this is where we get to Derrida. So Derrida had let's do a thought experiment with language, right? we use language to do logic, right? Like when we make an argument, you have clear definitions of words, and then we use those definitions to sort of define what we're talking about, and then we make our argument. Here's the problem with that. Imagine language like Wikipedia. You understand Wikipedia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wikipedia is actually more like what I would call a rhizome, because Wikipedia is kind of decentralized as well. There's no central starting point to Wikipedia. You start on one page and you just go off. Like, and next thing you know, you spent 9 hours on Wikipedia. I'm sure you can relate to that. And language is kind of like that.
Is this why you're so smart? You're spending 9 hours on Wikipedia a day?
Sometimes, yeah. But what I'm getting at is that imagine if language were a Wikipedia page, or like Wikipedia, except in this time, you know how you have those like little blue links on some of the words? You click on a word and it's blue, and it takes you to another page. Imagine a Wikipedia page, but every word is blue. All the words. Every word on the Wikipedia page takes you to a new page. And here's what's funny. If you visit enough of those pages, you'll find words that were used in that page being used to define other words that are used to define it. So what you see is that language isn't actually arborescent. It's a circular argument. You're using the same words to define the same words to define the same words. You can never ground your logic, and therefore you can never have like this absolutist objective concept of reality. Because if language truly does create reality, and language has no logical foundation, it has no ground foundation, it's just a mess of like rhizomatic connections, then it changes what knowledge is. It changes what philosophy is, and it changes what science is. And Deleuze, he wrote a book with his friend Guattari, and it's called "What is Philosophy?" And he changes the definition of philosophy. So essentially, philosophy, what it used to be defined as, was like, let's find the objective nature of reality, let's find the objective nature of knowledge, let's find the objective nature of value, and the objective nature of beauty. And he says, actually, that's not what philosophy is when we look at language. What philosophy really is its creativity, the creation of concepts. Science is the creation of functions, and art is the creation of sensations. So when you look at like the Transhumania videos, I deliberately try to incorporate all three of those things into them. I try to add like very, like, I don't know, flamboyant images to give you like sense data. I try to create new functions in science. I try to explore new parts of science, maybe so we can like sort of investigate places that aren't being investigated. And then, of course, the creation of concepts. I make up my own words a lot, and so does Deleuze. So that's what philosophy really is. It's just the creation of concepts. That's all it is. There's no let's find what the objective definition of the word I don't know, physics is, or the objective definition of this or that. It's all perspectivist. That's not necessarily relativist, because there is an objective reality. Prescriptivism just says each human perceives that objective reality differently, and only by organizing with other humans can we get closer, like dialectically closer to this reality. Of course, there's a question of whether that's even possible to have objective knowledge, to have absolute knowledge. Hegel thinks it's possible. Deleuze doesn't think it's possible. But yeah, this rhizome, it's an interesting idea, because AI researchers, they can start, when they're building the AIs to make them more like humans, they can use this concept of the rhizome in neural networks. So you know neural networks, right? You have what are called like activation nodes. And each of the activation nodes are structured just like the neurons. You have input and outputs, and they can connect to each other. And just like our neurons change, they can change. They rearrange themselves. Let's say we have an AI with the nodes. They receive input from the environment that says dog, right? Like a picture of a dog. And then they answer cat. There is negative feedback, and it punishes the AI. So then the AI is forced to rearrange its nodes until it gets the answer right. In a way, the AI is just like a child, like a human child. It's being taught right from wrong, and it's rearranging its own brain to get the right answer. And when it gets positive feedback, you get what's called backpropagation. Backpropagation is the AI's equivalent of neuroplasticity. So just like we grow up and the potentiality of our brains gets molded into specific connections, the AI will also grow up by watching us. And that's why we should try to be nicer, so that the AI doesn't grow up to be a psychopath.
Ooh, that makes a lot of sense.
Think about factory.
It brings up that idea.
Yeah, what kind of input does factory farming send to an AI? It tells them that mommy and daddy think might makes right. So if you are smarter than another species, we are smarter than cows. Therefore, we are justified to kill cows and eat them for burgers, tasty burgers. And one day, this AI, it's not very smart right now, but maybe 50 years later, it becomes smarter than people. It says, well, I saw mommy and daddy do this to cows because they justified it by being smarter. Well, I'm smarter than you, bitch, so I'm going to fuck up your planet. Let's get a bunch of nanobots and fucking...
Whoa.
So...
Did you just come up with a transhumanist argument for veganism?
I guess it could be considered an argument for veganism, but only if you justify it with might makes right. If you justify anti-veganism with like I'm stronger than you, therefore I can kill you, that's the message it'll send to AI. But if you come up with another argument for why you eat cows, maybe the AI won't be as much of a psychopath. For instance, like I was on a deserted island and there was nothing else to eat. Well, rarely is the AI ever going to be on a deserted island with another human that it'll have to kill to survive.
Right. Or you could just say the reason I'm eating meat is because I need this nutritionally for my survival. And that the AI aren't going to need to kill us for its survival. I mean, what if it does think that though? Yeah, what if it does think I did need to kill these humans for my survival?
But yeah, it's not. I'm not necessarily like a vegan fanatic, but that is one way in which you could sort of make a computer science argument for ethics. But yeah, that's another way in which you could use the rhizome. Is you could, instead of, because AI, they're structured very hierarchically. You have what are called decision trees. So when an AI plays chess, it has a decision tree for how it should win the game, and it thinks 3 moves ahead of the other person, so it can win the big game. But that's not thinking. That's not consciousness. That's just brute force. If we want the AI to be conscious, we have to make it rhizomatic. We have to make it decentralized rather than centralized in the way in which it computes. So that's just another application of the rhizome. Also, city planning, like futuristic cities, better cities. Deleuze wrote about what he calls a heterotopia. You ever heard the term heterotopia? So heterotopia is it's like the rhizome applied to cities. So there's a big problem with cities right now. And do you know what the big problem is? Yes,
traffic.
Exactly. Fucking traffic. So why do we have traffic?
Because the freaking roads are crazy. They're just... We don't have enough roads. We don't have enough roads, I guess. Like, I don't know. What the heck? Why?
The roads are the problem. And why are the roads the problem? Because there's too many fucking people on the roads. But we need the people because they live in the city. So why are the roads crowded? Perhaps, Deleuze asks, it's because everyone's trying to get to the same place at the same fucking time. Do they need to be at the same place at the same time? Do they really need to be... do all the kids need to start school at 7? Does everyone have to live in this specific part of the city? Deleuze says, well, actually... the way in which we plan cities made cities a worse place to live. So for instance, let's say we have crime, right? We wanted to reduce crime. How do you reduce crime? Well, what we thought as city planners was we just take all the criminals and we put them in one place. And we take all the rich people and we put them in another place. And what happens is the opposite happened. The criminals didn't reform themselves. They actually got worse because they were around other criminals and they couldn't meet people from different walks of life. Meanwhile, the rich people, they became ever more elitist, to the point where you get like these the champagne socialists in the universities, the let them eat cake like libertarians and anarcho-capitalists. They get more and more elite because they don't meet people from different walks of life. And that's one example of how Deleuze points out that city planning destroyed fucking cities. Another example he gives is break-ins. So we want to reduce break-ins, right? Why the hell would we put all the people in one part of the city, which is downtown, while they're at work, and then leave the suburbs empty so that the fucking burglars know for a fact they aren't home? It's the dumbest idea ever. Rather than just like having workplaces near living areas, or living areas near workplaces, or like why do we have to have a market region of the city, and then like a bakery region of the city, and then an industrial region of the city, and then like a fucking suburb region, a rich people region and a poor people region? They're not going to understand reality better if it's structured like this. And that's part of the reason we get fucking traffic. Everyone's going to work at the same time. Everyone's coming home at the same time, coming home to their fucking burgled houses because there was no neighbors around to keep watch. This is what I spent part of my childhood in a suburb, and I fucking hated it. There was nothing to do. There was no other, like, I couldn't meet any of the other kids because everyone living there was a boomer. They were all fucking old, and I couldn't like it was the same type of person everywhere, and I couldn't meet anyone else from any other walk of life. It's just a horrible place to be.
Wow.
Like, Deleuze describes how dystopian we made our cities, and we should unmake them and then try something different.
Wow. I feel like I grew up in a suburb. Well, no. I grew up in like an apartment complex. And actually there was like a lot of kids everywhere. So I had lots of kids to play with. There was like a big activity center where all the kids would meet and just like freaking play video games and like every freaking thing. And it The swimming pool is just like, wow, makes me think maybe living in the suburbs is not a good place to grow up. But then I moved to the suburbs later,
That's
and it was less inducive to social atmosphere as a kid. That's true.
another example is this is how you get incels and like femcells is if you isolate all the men in one part of the city and all the women in other parts of the city, you decrease the chances in which they'll meet, and it'll create like skewed gender ratios and resentment. So when you get resentment, you get incels, you get femcells, and they create these narratives about how the other sex is evil, and they just want to like fuck you over and like exploit you or use you. And a lot of that is just due to social alienation. So again, we see
Now, what are femcells?
mental illness comes.
Explain the femcell thing, because I don't. That's not a term. I'm very familiar with incels. I'm not that familiar with what the
Femcell is it's a different conception because like if you like talk to incels, they'll say like women can't be incels because like literally any guy is okay with sex. So apparently like they're only sad because they can't have someone attractive. But I would say, isn't that what describes the incel community as well? Because they all want attractive people. They're not going to settle for an ugly person. But what I mean by femcell is they have the same, they structure the same resentment towards other people. For example, there's a feminist academic by the name of Angela Dworkin. You ever heard of her? She's that feminist who said all sex is rape. Every sexual exchange is a dominant submissive relationship where the man exploits the woman, and all sex should be banned. That's an example of, and then look up a picture of her, Angela Dworkin, and you will see why she probably holds that view. Maybe because she's never like had a lot of it herself. It's kind of like a philosophy born out of resentment rather than like actual analysis.
Oh,
yeah.
mm-hmm.
It's a mix of like pity and also like anger.
Okay, we're gonna show a picture of Andrea Dworkin.
Is it Andrea? I thought it was Angela. Oops.
Andrea Dworkin.
Yeah, she says like all sex is rape and like all men are pigs and we need to castrate all men. Blah blah blah. Not all feminists are like that. I mean, it's yeah, a lot. Not all of it is born out of resentment. Like I would say, the very first feminist, Mary Wollstonecraft.
You know, if she lost weight and was like fit, she might not be that, unattractive. She might actually be a pretty attractive woman if she just like really took care of herself.
Yeah, you got convergent goals with life extension there. But the point I'm getting at is a lot of this is born out of resentment and not necessarily psychiatric disorders, but social disorders. The incels haven't met enough women in their lives. They're not living a kind of life where they would daily interact with women daily, and they grow to resent them. They talk about them in ways that are almost alien. Like they use the term human female and femoid to talk about women rather than women. So it goes to show that they don't understand like the language, the everyday language that most people would use. And it's not because the incels are mentally ill. It's because we don't have a heterotopia. We don't have an urban organization that allows people to overcome their alienation. There's no community. Did you feel a sense of community when you were in the suburbs? I certainly didn't. I felt like everyone was isolated in their own little fortress and trying to keep everyone out.
Yeah, I did feel that way, but I guess my community came when I was at school, and then when I went to church on Sundays. That's a lot of community right there.
Yeah, I guess the church.
Right?
The church is very communal. I didn't go at this time, but the suburbs were definitely an alienating place. I didn't even know who my neighbor was, and they weren't interested in who I was, and I wasn't interested in who they were. But once I moved to when I lived in Calgary, I moved to like a special part of the city where I lived for a while, and it was like at the intersection of four different train rails, and they took me to different parts of the city. So I was able to visit a different part of the city every day. And the people who were going to visit other people in the city, maybe they made a pit stop there. So you had this like one region where you did get to meet people from different walks of life, and I really liked that. I liked living in that area of the city more than the suburbs. Also, like college.
That is
in
awesome.
College, you don't have this giant like suburb house. You don't have this McMansion where you isolate yourself. Your dorm room is very small, so you're kind of forced to go interact with people. So that's why
I like that. I like that type of.
Well.
Yeah, I like that type of living situation as well, where you're kind of forced to talk to new people. Because when I lived in Hawaii, I lived on this like fruit farm, like it was a work trade. It was a work trade situation, and it was like people constantly coming to the farm, like people coming, and then they would leave, and new people come in, and just like constantly talking to like new faces, and that's a very stimulating environment. And all the conversations, it's like you're really learning a lot and engaging your mind and learning social skills. So it's very cool. That the world needs to be that way. It seems like it's less of that
There's
now,
less.
right? There's less community spaces. Where's the community space where I can just go and not have to buy an alcoholic drink and not have to smell smoke or something, where people where the whole reason you're going there is just to meet people and talk and be friendly. Where is
Yeah,
that? It's like
I'd say
gone.
I think Foucault blames capitalism and Deleuze blames fascism. In a sense, like the fascistic planning of a city, the fascistic architecture makes it like kind of it kind of tries to hierarchically organize the physical world in the way that they hierarchically organize the intellectual and ideal world. So the way in which they organize ideas reflects on reality, and they try to put things in certain boxes, and you're less likely to go see people outside of those boxes. You wake up in the morning in your isolated box, you get into your four-wheeled box, and in your little isolated four-wheeled box, you drive to another box, and in that little box, you have a computer. Sometimes a boss will come to yell at you, and you're isolated in that little box, and then you go off to the drive-through where another guy working in his little box hands you a little box in your little box. You eat your little box in your little box, and then you drive home to your other box. That's one of the problems.
And then you eventually end up in a
Exactly,
box.
exactly.
It's just it
There's
never ends. It's
there's
just
a clear
boxes.
there's a clear link between like socialization and death. If you look at Dan Buettner's book Blue Zones, he talks about how like community and religion and like kind of being connected to other people is a huge factor on like your stress levels and your cortisol and whether or not you make it to like 100. So these people who live in like Italy, these Mediterranean people and like Greek people who live on these islands where it's just the community and nothing else, they have longer life expectancies. They live to something like 100. Same with the Japanese on Okinawa, where like they have a concept called a moai. A moai is when you are born. They link you with five other kids, like socially, and like they encourage socialization between those five kids, and then they grow up together in that moai. It's kind of like the best Western translation for moai would be like the squad or the boys or whatever. That meme.
Right.
And those are the sort of like the idea of a moai is that when someone in the moai is in trouble, you rush to their aid financially. So they're not reliant on the welfare system. They're not reliant on like bailouts. They're not reliant on theft or like criminality or getting like some dead end job or having an OnlyFans account or like having to become a stripper or
Right.
something. It's kind of like a mobile commune, a commune that you can take with you wherever you go. And when somebody dies, like you become like the godfather of their children. It's kind of like an "I got your back, you got my back" situation. We don't have that
Yeah.
anymore,
Okay.
and it's really
Yeah.
sad. But
That's why people get depressed and take drugs and do all kinds of self-destructive things because it's like they're lacking that sense of community and love. Really, it's love. It's like they're trying to fill a void. Like most of these addictive things people are doing and these like dangerous things and bad things, it's almost like to just make themselves feel a sense of love. And even people trying to rise the status ladder and be more successful, and it's all just trying to like make themselves feel. I've even heard certain famous people, okay? They said they're only doing what they did to feel loved, like literally, because they love that love, fans and adoration and just this. You know what
exactly,
I mean? It's like a lot of the human motivation out there for doing everything is just to feel
I mean,
loved.
like yeah, look at Hitler. Like in Hitler's childhood, he had his father Adolphus Hitler was kind of like he beat him up a lot and like was very like mean to him and whatnot. And he never had this like Hitler always sought like the approval of his of other people. He was never able to gain like an internal sense of validation because his parents never encouraged it. So what he did was when his uncle who was taking care of him died, he inherited like the money he worked for his entire life, and he dressed up in like fancy suits and he went around town like throwing parties, throwing dollars at the club or whatever like the 1920s German equivalent of that was. But yeah, then he moved to Vienna and he blew his entire his uncle's entire fucking life savings in 1 year. So he was just partying it up in the city and he blew it. And he was just looking for people's approval. And then eventually that led him to go into like to art school because he wanted to like woo women with his drawings. Again, like he wasn't able to get that internal validation. And then the military, where he, like in his own words, he sought the camaraderie between the soldiers. Like it was always but that the military is the worst place to find that. For like, I mean, you will have a sense of camaraderie with the soldiers, but it'll come at the cost of destroying other communities, destroying other people, and ruining their sense of togetherness. Not to mention, like once the war is over, you guys disband. And usually, if you look at like American veterans, a lot of the times, a lot of them end up homeless and they end up isolated from each other anyway. So he was really looking in the wrong place. All he really wanted was the validation of other people. I mean, when you look at incels and femcels, it's all the like alienation and resentment is also this lack of love that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And again, let me clarify. I'm not saying like all feminism is like born out of like a resentment of men. For example, like Google Mary Wollstonecraft.
Mary Wollstonecraft. Okie dokie. Let's see. Let's do that.
So I would say like this woman was probably she was probably the first feminist philosopher. She wrote a book called A Vindication of the Rights of Women, and it was basically saying that like if you want a better relationship, if you want better relationships in life, you should kind of try to develop a friendship with your partner rather than using them as a tool. So it's basically it's like for us this is fucking common sense, but back in the 1700s it wasn't common sense. By the way, she had a daughter. You know what her daughter's name was? Mary Shelley. Yep.
Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is one of my favorite movies.
So Mary Shelley is actually the first sci-fi author, and she was like the daughter of the first feminist philosopher. So maybe the academic gene runs in her family or something like that. She's very creative in the way that she wrote Frankenstein, because it wasn't just a fiction. It was Frankenstein was a what could happen. It wasn't it was a simulation of like the future, like what could happen if we don't think about science properly. And Aristotle wrote about like what fiction should be. So Plato and Aristotle, you know how we were talking about them earlier, they had some differing opinions on art as well. Plato actually wanted to ban art. He thought art would help would lead to like degeneracy and the overthrow of the government. So he's like, we need to ban all art, just fucking ban it. No music, no art, no dancing, nothing. So it's kind of like an ISIS kind of deal with Plato there. But Aristotle had the opposite.
Yeah, that's not going to go well.
Aristotle's like, okay, yeah, Plato's right about like art being like degenerate and subversive and shit sometimes, but he wrote a book called Poesis, and in it he described the actual function of art. So what Aristotle thinks art is three things. The first thing is craftsmanship. So like how well is a piece of a movie, a piece of music, or a painting made? How well is it made? Is there skill involved? Is it hard to do? The second component is mimesis. Mimesis means how well does it mimic nature? For example, if I'm painting a landscape, how close is it to the actual landscape? So, so you have techne is the craft, mimesis is the imitation, and then there's a third component. The third component is what he called poesis, which is like creativity, and a specific kind of creativity. Aristotle said art should be about conceptualizing possible scenarios in the future. So basically, Aristotle was kind of writing out what made sci-fi good. Why do we like sci-fi? We like sci-fi because it's an intellectual exercise, not just entertainment. It's improving the world through fiction because you're giving people ideas about the way in which the world could be. That goes back to Deleuze again. Deleuze philosophy isn't like a search for the absolute. It's the creation of concepts. We're just creating concepts, and it's not about how one should live. It's about how one might live.
Right, it's like we're creating our future, and that's what sci-fi is kind of like. It's like we're just painting a different option of what our future might look like.
It's like a laboratory where you have 100 different test runs, and we see which one of them we like, and then we run with that. You know, want as many simulations as possible, as many creative things as possible. So maybe we could bring the rhizome not just to city.
What if we're a simulation for a society that wanted to see how life would be in this situation, so it can avoid this? Like, you know, like, oh, this was a bad.
Yeah, maybe we're a creativity simulator for some higher civilization to mine ideas for them and be like, oh, hey, look, the simulation people came up with new ideas for us. Let's take them. So maybe it's just like a giant simulation for intellectual labor, and then they use that for whatever.
That would suck. And then they just turn us off once they're done with us. They just turn our consciousness
Yeah,
off.
I think in the Matrix it was about like using humans to power machines. I think that's very inefficient. It would have been cooler if they went with the idea that like humans are sort of dream mining or dream factories, and then you're taking their creative ideas, and that's the resource rather than just the fucking brain electricity, which is not a lot, to be honest.
Maybe when we're sleeping, that's when they start pulling off all this information out of our brains. That's what a dream is. They're just pulling off all this cool,
Like,
creative stuff.
You know how much it takes to power a brain? A fucking Big Mac. Like, the chemical energy in that is all it takes to power a fucking brain. Now, if you were to build, like, a computer with the equivalent amount of processing power to the human brain, you know how much power you would need? A city the size of... what's your city? What's your city's name again?
Oh, I'm not telling my city.
It's the size of where Rowan lives, plus an entire nuclear power plant to power it. That's how much you would need to make an artificial brain equal to this giant, like, tiny piece of meat the size of a football that could be powered with a Big Mac. And you know why that is? It's because we think differently, machines and us. The way in which, let's take a math problem, for instance. Let's say like one number plus another number plus another number plus another number. Humans look at this math problem and we just solve it simultaneously in our heads. But the way the AI does it is it takes a tiny piece, solves that, another tiny piece, solves that, another tiny piece, solves that. So AI does what's called serial computing, whereas human brains do what's called parallel computing. And because we can do parallel computing, because we can do like 100 different problems at once, we don't need as much electricity as the computer, which has to do each individual calculation. It's the same with like a picture. Like, for example,
right, that's how like a computer would solve a password.
Yeah, exactly.
It just goes through every letter. But a human, if they were to try to solve a password, they'd be guessing based upon what would seem most like would make sense according to
so like when an AI looks at this, they'll be like, oh shit, what is this? It does the calculation that this is a cap. It does the calculation that this is green. It does the calculation that this is white. It does the calculation that it's about the size of a tiny cup. It does all this pointless bullshit, but a human, it does all the calculations at once, and we know instantly what the fuck this is. And that's another reason we should apply the rhizome to AI research, because you can do things in parallel. It's like also quantum computing. Quantum computing is about parallel computing as well. You have different atoms. You can store more than one result, and then you can, the more qubits you add, the more problems you can do simultaneously. And that's why they're saying quantum computing power scales exponentially rather than linearly, because 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is not like 16. It's actually, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16 rather than 8. So it scales faster than regular computers.
Right.
But yeah, that's just another way we can apply the rhizome is art, AI research, the heterotopia, the like city planning. Also, you ever heard the term solar punk? So solar punk. Yeah, Google solar punk. Okay. So solar punk, it's supposed to be like the opposite of cyberpunk, but there's like a political undercurrent here. So the political ideology that's being criticized with cyberpunk is neoliberalism, whereas solar punk, it's glorifying like anarchism and like techno anarchism rather than attacking neoliberalism. And again, you see the heterotopia there. So what you're probably seeing on the screen right now, I don't know if Rowan pulled it up yet, but you're probably seeing the farm being combined with the city. So again, we don't relegate farming to this tiny area and living to this another tiny area, and then suburbs to this other tiny area. It's all just it all goes rhizomatically. It just goes organically.
Right.
So that way you don't have these giant fucking fleets of transportation. You don't have these giant fleets of trucks using up tons of fucking gas to get like food from one part of the world to another part of the world. Everything is grown locally, and you make the system more efficient that way. So when you resist like top-down authoritarian organization and you just let your city run organically, it's more efficient.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Just like it reminds me of an ant colony. Yeah. It's like they're all working together. And they come up with the fastest route. You know, you see the ant. It's trail.
Interesting. The queen doesn't. They call it a queen, but the queen doesn't tell them shit. They figure it out for themselves. It's interesting.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. We should work more like an ant colony, like a hive mind species or something, right? Like a bee colony.
Some people say that's the only way in which like anarchism could ever be realized, because it's just so difficult to horizontally organize a society. And that you kind of need the vertical organization. Otherwise, people would go around like fucking burning shit and whatnot. But if you had your minds all connected at once, you would be able to resolve your differences more quickly. Because right now we resolve our differences very slowly. The way in which we resolve our differences is somebody fucks up, then other people fuck up, and then the people allied with those people fuck up the other people, and then you have this like escalation of conflict. Whereas if everyone's just sort of connected, you can see both sides of the argument and resolve it quickly. That's why I think you could eventually you could abolish the police if you had this is where it gets controversial, because the social credit system, I think it's right now the way in which it's being used is a bad thing, but I think it could become a good thing if used properly, because the way a social credit system works is it could one day become a substitute for police. So let's say you commit a crime, whatever, you fucking, I don't know, you run over a puppy or some shit on the highway, and let's say we have this brain internet, and you have what's called a smart contract. So the smart contract is connected to your smartphone, which is connected to your fucking VR personality and whatnot. Let's say your smart contract immediately notifies everyone else in the Rhizomatic network of your crime, so to speak, and then they organize in a way that recognizes the crime. And rather than having the cops escort you to prison, your home becomes the prison. So you just get placed on house arrest. You get a notification on your phone that you're on house arrest for fucking 2 months for running over a puppy or some shit. So what's to stop me from going outside? Well, the social credit system. The social credit system was notified that I committed this crime. And it's not like, oh, you're being canceled. We're canceling you, and we're going to ruin your life, and we're going to post your address, and we're going to harass your friends and family. It's like, no. The community has been notified that you must be rehabilitated. So when you go outside, they will kind of social distance from you, so to speak, in a way that encourages you to just, I don't know, stay home because no one will interact with you. So that's one situation in which the social credit system isn't as dystopian. Like in China, if you fuck up on the social credit system, a bunch of cops will come to your house and beat the shit out of you. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm getting at more of like a social credit system that's not like mandatory. It's just you use it because everyone else uses it. It's kind of like having a Twitter. I have a Twitter because everyone else has a Twitter. I'm not being forced to use Twitter. I just do. And Twitter kind of is our social credit system. I just want it to be less dystopian than what it is now. You know, because the Twitter. Yeah. The problem with Twitter is the mob. I don't like the mob. I like the idea of a social credit system. The problem is the mob is the one enforcing it. There's no blockchain. There's no blockchain system set up where everyone is treated equally. It's kind of Twitter just decides what's trending, and then we all go after whatever's trending, and we beat up the person who's trending or whatever. I think there are ways.
Right. It's like
using the blockchain.
It's like a schoolyard bully system.
It's a schoolyard bully system, but you could organize it more with blockchain to be more decentralized and less hierarchical, like it is now. I think that's possible. So definitely far off in the future, but I think one day you could replace the fucking cops with something that's so much better.
Sounds freaking awesome.
Yeah. Want to answer some questions? Let's see if...
I don't think there is very many questions, but I wanted to ask you...
Oh, you know what? It's Saturday. People are probably doing shit. That's why.
Probably. I wanted to ask you, of all you were saying, you know, as a philosopher, like... you want to have all these terms you're making up and things, and what if the philosophies that you've made that actually are you could say, okay, this is mine, I coined it, like this is my philosophy, I invented this, versus a philosophy you've just taken from someone else and have said, you know, you've explained it, that's basically someone else's philosophy.
The creation for the more people than you, the people who you ever heard the expression standing on the shoulders of giants? So Newton comes up with Newton comes up with calculus, and then we use calculus to find other scientific theories and say, look what I did. But you don't credit Newton for coming up with calculus that allowed you to do that. And same goes for art. Like let's look at how rock music evolved out of the blues music, and then look at how heavy metal evolved out of rock, and how punk evolved out of rock, and how hardcore and post-hardcore evolved out of metal, and how rap evolved out of like R&B, like rhythm and blues, which also evolved out of the blues, which evolved out of like gospel music, and then like house also evolved out of like all electronic music has a common root. So literally nothing is an original creation. Nothing in human society is an original creation. The only way
Or at least it's nothing is a completely original.
Exactly.
We're all remixing something. We're remixing and remashing.
Yeah, so you're allowed to take credit for doing the remix, but that still means everything in society is a remix. The one example I would say,
Right.
if there was a person who was born on a deserted island and had no human contact their entire lives, whatever they created, sure, that's rightfully their creation. However, what about their DNA that allowed them to do that? Was the DNA a remix? Of course it was. Human DNA is a
Right.
remix of like primate DNA. Primate
Right.
DNA is a remix of mammalian DNA. Mammalian DNA is a remix
Here's
of
an idea.
reptiles.
Here's an idea. What if there are 100% unique ideas, but the reason they can't express themselves is because we don't even have the language to express the ideas. But what if I've had completely original thoughts and original philosophies, but the reason I haven't said them, and the reason other people haven't said them, is because we can't actually express those because we don't have the words to express those ideas. It's possible.
Yeah, so
And
I
you could
guess-
have the same thing, like trapped in your brain.
I guess in that
different ideas
sense,
that
you're doing philosophy because you're creating concepts. You're asking not how one should live, how one might live. So I guess the way in which you're applying it applies to society, which is not your original creation, but the way in which you've contextualized your idea is your contribution. So I'm not saying people
Right,
should be allowed
let's
to take
take-
credit. Of course, people should be allowed to take credit. It's just that nothing is ever done in a vacuum.
Yeah. What is, let's say, the idea or philosophy of yours that is, if not 100% unique, what about the most unique? That is the most intrinsic to your brain and it's kind of uniquely yours in a way?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say from the Transhumania channel or just in general?
Just in general.
Just in general, I think it would be the fact that everything doesn't exist and nothing doesn't exist, but they do simultaneously exist to allow for something. I'd say that's kind of my original idea. It's I use what's called paraconsistent logic. So again, it's already not my original idea because I'm borrowing somebody else's logic and applying the logic to this concept. Essentially, paraconsistent logic. It asks, is it possible for a contradiction to be true? Do you think it could ever be possible for that to be a possibility?
For a contradiction to be true.
So a contradiction is it is
I don't
Tuesday.
know.
It's not Tuesday.
Yeah.
That's an example of a contradiction.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it.
That is,
Personally.
yeah, of course, it absolutely doesn't seem like it. But what about quantum mechanics? Would quantum mechanics be an example of something being contradictory? The superposition, Everett's many worlds. Wouldn't that be an example of?
I'm not versed enough in quantum mechanics to even say so. Like I'm like a retard when it comes to quantum mechanics. Like really,
Okay.
That field of science is just like I watched What the Bleep Do We Know, and it's like talking about quantum mechanics, and I'm like,
I actually kind of hate that movie because
I
kind of hate that movie because it like has this huge misconception of like what the observer effect is. What they say is that the observer effect is like whenever you look at something, your consciousness creates it. That's called idealism, and it's bullshit. What's actually happening is that a particle of light is bouncing off the thing and into your eye, and the act of the particle bouncing off the thing changes the thing, not your consciousness. So like a particle of light bounces off, gets into your eye, but the particle has already changed the thing. You didn't change it by looking at it. You just see it being changed. But yeah, I'll explain what it is. So dialetheism. So there's a philosopher in Australia. He's still alive. His name's Graham Priest. So Graham Priest came up with this idea of what if we took the foundational 3 laws of logic? So Aristotle, he was kind of the guy who invented logic. He had 3 laws. Law number 1 is called the law of identity. A equals A. Law 2 is called the law of excluded middle, meaning everything must be like reducible to truthness or falseness. So whether I say this cup is here, it's either true or false. There's no third thing it can be. It's either true or false. And then there's a third law. The third law is called the law of contradiction. So what that says is a thing must be either only true or either only false. It can't be both of those at the same time. And Graham Priest, he says we could doubt that. And he says we could look at something called the liar's paradox. So you know what the liar's paradox is, right?
No.
It's goes something like this. This sentence is false. Is that a true statement or a false statement?
Oh, I think I've heard this before. It's like a word trick or something.
It's not necessarily a trick. It's a loophole in language. This sentence is false.
And for sure, 100%, this guy is a liar when he says this. Is that what I'm
Yeah,
supposed to
so
think?
essentially he's a liar, but he's telling the truth, but he's lying, but he's telling the truth, but he's lying, but he's telling the truth. And people responded to Graham Priest, and they're like, okay, well, you're just doing a trick of the mind here. This is like it relates to something we call like the principle of explosion, where the contradiction, it's a you can't do that because then literally any argument would be valid. But when we look into that more, it's not really true, because dialetheism says there can still be true things and false things. It's just that sometimes things can be simultaneously true and false, and that statement is true. So it's not saying like, oh, I can claim that unicorns exist, or I can claim that this, and I can claim that, and I can claim whatever I want. He's not saying that. He's saying that sometimes in nature, when we explore specific concepts like quantum mechanics or the nature of reality, we see things that are simultaneously true and false. And one example where I apply this logic is to the nature of reality, the idea of infinity and zero. So here's my famous contribution to philosophy or whatever, is that there's no such thing as nothing, and there's no such thing as everything. But there is such a thing as nothing, and there is such a thing as everything, because the emergent property of those things existing is called somethingness. So in a sense, the number zero is a social construct, the number infinity is a social construct, but everything in between is what this is. That's why I'm not like that scared of like the heat death of the universe, because I don't really believe it's possible to have nothing. I think it's just a social construct, like the idea of nothingness. Another problem is this gets into like God. Is it possible to have everythingness? Is it possible for everything to be simultaneously everything? I don't think that's possible, because then we wouldn't be having this conversation, because the very act of having this conversation demonstrates a lack of things. Desire itself demonstrates a lack of things. But also nothingness is false too, because when you try to think of nothingness, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about something. So that's an example in which I'd use a dialetheia to show that there is simultaneously something and nothing, or everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the emergent property of that dialetheia is somethingness. Everythingness plus nothingness equals somethingness. Or nihility and infinity equals finity. That's one way you could mention it.
Any other philosophies of yours that are like you would say are unique to you?
Oh yeah, how about
not? They don't have to necessarily.
We just talked about time,
original,
right? So
but you know,
we just talked about time, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does Einstein's equation for relativity, where you have the time, you have the t exponent 2. So you know what that means, right? Let's say we put the number. T is a variable, right? So you can put any number to substitute that variable. Let's say the number 3.
Yeah.
So 3 to the power of 2. What's 3 to the power of 2?
3 to the power of 2 would be 6, right?
No, it'd be
wait.
It means 3 times 3.
Oh, 3 times 3? See, I don't even know basic math. 3 times 3 is 3 times 3 threes. That's
3 times,
9.
yeah, that's 9. So 3 to the power of 2. So 3 to the power of 2 equals 9. So that t, if you put a 3 there, then you'll get 9. So if you substitute the 3 for the t, you get 9. However, what else equals 9? There's another way you can get 9. What about negative 3 times negative 3? Negative 3 to the power of 2.
Oh. Negative 3 times negative 3 is 9?
Yep, just positive 9.
Wow.
So this is an example of how when you have this variable in physics, the t to the power of 2, you can put positive time and negative time in, and the laws of physics still work exactly the way it is, except instead of entropy, you'll get negentropy. Negentropy is like entropy that gives us our perception. So what if, and hear me out, what if it's possible that time can equally run backwards as it can run forwards, and we've just evolved it to perceive it running in one direction? What if time itself is a social construct, just like nothingness is, and everythingness is?
Whoa.
There's a lot of ways you can use the.
How is that possible? How is that possible? Because every day we wake up, it's like it seems like the time has just progressed in one direction. Like, how do you go back? You know what I mean? Like, how do you do that?
Well, what do you think will happen at the end of the universe?
How can I relive yesterday? Like,
how can you relive yesterday? So there's two forces in the laws of physics, what we call gravity, which brings things together, and what we call negative energy, which pushes things apart. And by things, I mean space-time itself. So there's not particles being pushed apart. The actual space in reality is expanding. But gravity is trying to pull things together. So whichever one of those wins the tug of war will either result in like a heat death or a cold death. And by a cold death, I mean everything being crunched together, and the universe will collapse back into a singularity, and that process will repeat over and over and over and over. And that not only will repeat over and over, but the act of the singularity will enable that the causality is the same every single time. So the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, some people have compared this to eternal recurrence. So eternal recurrence is his idea that what if you had to live your life over and over and over. I don't really think Nietzsche was talking about physics when he said that. I think it was more of a thought experiment, because he was trying to figure out if you're a life denier or a death, if you embrace life or death. Because if you embrace life, you'd be like, oh yeah, of course I love life. I'd rather live life over and over and over. I have no problem with that. I love life. Whereas if you're like a deathist, and you'd be like, oh, that sounds horrible. Living my life over and over again and never being able to die. Oh, fuck this. So Nietzsche would say like you have like some fucking work to do on your existence, contemplating your existence. Like
well, I mean, we both agree it's not preferable to just repeat
Nietzsche
your
himself
own
was
life, right?
Nietzsche himself was very life affirming, and he like called these kinds of people like cowards. His litmus test for whether or not you were what he calls the overman was eternal recurrence, and he calls it amor fati. Amor fati is when you embrace the eternal recurrence. You say, yeah, I'd be willing to live forever and just do this over and over. I love life. I don't care if I have to live.
How about not embrace it, but like accept it? Like I wouldn't want that as my first choice, to live the same life over and over again. But like if I have to in order to live forever, then
I wasn't thinking of it as torture. My best interpretation of Nietzsche's eternal recurrence would be a movie. You ever seen Groundhog Day? So Groundhog Day is about Nietzsche. It's about, let's say, not only are you living your life over and over, you live one specific day over and over. And the story is about how the character, Bill Murray, goes from like a life denier to a life affirmer. He sort of becomes immersed in the process of life, whereby he just loves existing so much that he doesn't care if he repeats it over and over. And in doing so, he is freed from the prison. He becomes Nietzsche's.
That's not fair. That's not fair, because the way he lives his life over again is not the exact way. Because he can change what he does. So it's not the same. It's not the same at all. That would be super fun.
Oh yeah.
I would take that in a heartbeat. Living the same day over again, and I can just change anything I do, and getting to die and then wake up right again. Like that's a whole awesome thing there.
Yeah,
but
so
we're talking about like living the same long life over and over again. That's less exciting, and that's not obviously something we would want as our first choice, right? We would take that, we would accept it if we had to in order to live forever. But you wouldn't want that as your first choice. You would want instead to have your life be one long line that goes on forever, indefinitely, that is unique and new changing experiences that never ends, right? You wouldn't want to live the same life over and over again.
I think what Nietzsche was trying to say is like, okay, let's not. I don't mean literally living your life over and over, but let's say you lived it over and over and were conscious that you had to live it over and over, so you would be tortured by it in a sense. He'd say, well, you love life more than death, such that you'd rather have a boring life than die. What he's trying to say is like, do you value meaningfulness, or do you value happiness? So Bill Murray, at the beginning of Groundhog Day, he's a hedonist. He doesn't give a shit about anybody else. He doesn't give a shit about this. He just wants like basic gratification. He's a hedonist. And throughout this process of transformation, he becomes the Nietzschean Übermensch, whereby the overman, the transhuman or whatever, the transcendent person, whereby he trades the desire for happiness in for a desire for meaningfulness. So he doesn't care about his hedonism at the end of the movie. He does things that are meaningful. He goes around helping people. That's what the movie was trying to say, is that it's better to value life than to value happiness. And that's a message I'd say I could very much agree with. So yeah, watch Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day is it's one of my favorite movies for sure. I don't know if the creators were like trying to display Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, but I think they might have done so inadvertently. But yeah, so that's what were we talking about before this? Before Nietzsche. Oh, right, dialetheia. So dialetheia. Let's talk about something else. The Sorites paradox. You ever heard of the Sorites paradox? So, are you familiar with the term qualitative and quantitative?
I've heard them.
So quantitative.
I don't exactly know what they are.
So quantitative is about primary characteristics. So we have an object. Primary characteristics are space, time, and number. So here we see there's one of this. It is this height. It has this weight. It has mathematical characteristics. That's what we call quantitative. But then we have qualitative characteristics, what we call secondary characteristics. You see that this is green, but your green, the way you perceive green might be different from the way I perceive green. Like we perceive the same thing quantitatively, but we don't perceive the same thing qualitatively. And this is where the people come to attack mind uploading. They're like, you can upload your mind to a computer, but it won't feel like you. And what the Sorites paradox asks is, what if the qualitative is the quantitative? What if the number of things is what determines the perception of color, smell, taste, touch? And the way in which you can do this is the Sorites paradox. So let me ask you a question. Are there any puddles outside your house right now? Did it rain there? I'm not sure if it rained there. But look out the window and look for a puddle.
No.
How many raindrops would you have to add for the puddle to become a lake? Because the difference between a puddle and a lake is a qualitative experience. I feel different when I'm jumping in a puddle versus jumping in a lake. So what has changed between the puddle and the lake? It wasn't a qualitative change. It was a quantitative change. You added a higher number of raindrops to that puddle that turned it into a lake. So the qualitative is the quantitative. This is another example of like a dialetheia contradiction. And this is why I'm more like willing to embrace mind uploading than you are, I'd say. You have like legit reasons, you bring up some very good points about like why we should be scared of mind uploading. But I'd say the one of the points, the point that it won't feel like you, I don't think I agree with. I think it could feel like you if you add the correct number of neurons and you add the correct number of feedback loops and the correct number of calculations and the correct number of like parallel computing processes and also the correct number of neuroplastic connections. Then I think it could feel like you, even though the neurons are made of silicon. All that has really changed is a quantitative change, because what's the difference between a carbon atom and a silicon atom? Carbon feels different than silicon, right? Like when I touch a person, it feels different than when I'm touching a robot. But the only difference is qualitative. A silicon atom is just a carbon atom with more protons and neutrons, and then a couple extra electrons. So it's really the number of things that has increased, not the essence of a thing itself. So what I'm getting at is that essences don't exist.
Here's the thing. Your example with the water, the puddle turning into the
Yes.
lake with just the quantity of water, that's very different than a human brain, because the brain is not just like water. It's like all these neurons and everything, but it's like it's location based. I feel like it's the location of the original neuron versus if you were to copy yourself, it's a different location. So we're talking like space, right? So like if you create another one of me, like on the other side of the world, and like what the heck? How does my consciousness get over there just because it's the same
I see what you're saying. So,
exact copy? That's a location problem. And if you create me anywhere, it's going to be a different location than is right here. That means it can't be me because it's literally, by definition, in a different location. It's taking up different space. It's not the original neuron. So that's my issue.
So that's actually the one thing I fear about mind uploading. If there's one thing I fear about mind uploading, it's what you just called. It's called Leibniz's law. Or Leibniz's law is essentially states that two things which have all the same property, including space and time, are the same thing. And two things that have all the same properties but are missing one property, let's say like space or time, that's a different thing. That's what Leibniz's law is. And it's essentially saying that your metaphysical location is part of your identity. So again, that's a quantitative change, because it's a measurable distance that is objective between you and me. When we look at quantitative things, we can agree on objective notions of how wide a thing is, how many numbers of a thing there are. Whereas like qualitative differences, like does it feel the same or different? So what I'm saying is by mind uploading is that you will have the same qualitative experience, but you won't have the same quantitative experience. So I'm not arguing against you. I think you make a very good argument against mind uploading. I'm arguing against like the kind of like zealots who are like, oh, this is a transgression against baby Jesus, and it won't feel the same. You're losing your soul by uploading your mind into this Satan machine or whatever. These people argue from a qualitative standpoint, whereas you're arguing from a quantitative standpoint. So it's one of these arguments I'm trying to defeat. And I don't know if you can ever defeat Leibniz's.
So basically, by saying my argument is good, it sounds like you are consenting to the idea
Kind of.
that if you were to make a copy, you will not experience
So
that feeling of being this other person. Like, let's say you create a copy of yourself, but then you were to die,
Exactly.
right? You're not going to experience the other Alex. It's not going to be you. It's a different consciousness that was created.
yeah,
You're
so
dead.
you
That's
might
a
be
new
asking right
consciousness.
now, hey, if you accept that mind uploading works for qualitative but not for quantitative, then why do you support mind uploading? You're asking like, hey Alex, if you disagree with mind uploading, why are you pro mind uploading? I'm not pro mind uploading for living forever. I'm pro mind uploading because it's reproduction. In a sense, we humans, all of us, have a desire to reproduce. I would like to reproduce, just not biologically. I don't like the idea of like, I don't know, engaging in like a kind of cost benefit relationship with other human beings, and then like raising a rugrat, and then going through like divorce and fucking like marriage and like all these horrible things. But what changed my perception of reproduction was like a really bad movie called the Star Wars Attack of the Clones. And my two favorite characters in that movie were Jango Fett and Boba Fett. And I was like, holy shit, this is an entirely different kind of family. A family where the father actually understands the son because they literally had the same genetic predispositions as the son. And I was wondering if you could take that even further. Rather than make biological clones, what if you could make mind clones? So the reason I support mind uploading is not because it'll extend my lifespan, but because it's a way to reproduce without
Okay.
mixing
That
your
makes sense.
genes. So yeah, obviously I'm still going to take like biological life extension treatments like stem cells, artificial organs, and all that
yeah.
fun stuff.
So in that sense, then in that context, I support mind uploading because I would, if I could right now and have the technology to scan my brain in a non-damaging way,
Yeah.
where it does not damage my physical body, and then create a clone of myself, fine. As long as I'm still here, as long as my original biology here, sure, why not create other Rowans, right? Like, why not? That's not my goal because like they're different people, but it's cool to just for your, like they can actually help you. Maybe you can learn a lot just by having yourself to talk to, right?
Yeah.
And then have this new Rowan like learn different things, and then it's eventually going to be totally different than you,
Exactly.
but it has
So
similarities
it's
that are
kind of a way. It's a new kind of reproduction where they keep more of your traits, but are still have the kind of right to self-determination that you would want a kid to have. So
right. But you know what? There's something dangerous about that too.
yeah,
Because creating copies of yourself, if they ever found out that they're based on you and they're a copy of you, they might turn a little psycho and want to kill you.
yeah, that's definitely a possibility.
It's like the evil child problem. same people who have the idea if they want to procreate biologically, that child could turn into a psychopath and want to kill you. It's always a risk. Even if it's small, it's possible.
Another problem is you never know if your kid will be conscious. So what you're talking about earlier was whether it's possible to ever know what another person is thinking. You could, but you could never be the other person. You could never perceive reality from their angle. This is called the hard problem of consciousness, which says that I'll never, like, while I could probably merge my mind with Rowan and know all of Rowan's memories, I can never be Rowan, right? Because in order to be Rowan, I would have to like put my perception, my phenomenological location inside your phenomenological location. I would have to like perceive reality from your point of view, which is not really possible, and that's
Yeah.
called the hard problem of consciousness. And in a way, you don't know if your like mind clone, your child, your mind child, is the same as has the same kind of consciousness as you, because you could never perceive reality from their perspective. So you just kind of have to take it on faith.
Right.
And that's why I don't like the Turing test, because this is a problem with the Turing test. Is sure it can measure intelligence, but it can't measure consciousness. I can't tell if what's the robot's name from Ex Machina? Is it Ada? Ava. I can never know if Ava is conscious because I'm not Ava. I'm me. I'm Alex Kotov. But I could make inferences about Ava's intelligence or her traits or her personality. So I think that's what the Turing test should be for.
Yeah, I agree. You cannot determine consciousness.
But yeah, what we were talking about earlier. Oh, right, so dialetheia, so true contradictions. Have you ever played the game Portal on PlayStation? Look up GLaDOS. GLaDOS.
GLaDOS. GLAD what?
DOS.
OS? Okay.
So GLaDOS is like a game that wants to kill everything, right? And the way you defeat GLaDOS in the end, you use the liar's paradox. So
wait, you cut out there.
The way you defeat GLaDOS in the end, the way you defeat this rogue AI, is you tell it the liar's paradox. This sentence is false, and it kind of contradicts like its own in the CPU. The CPU kind of like has like a circuit error because it's not able to calculate the liar's paradox. So that's it's like, wait, is the sentence true or is it false? And because computers work in compartmentalized operations, they do serial computing rather than parallel computing. Because of the way computers think, GLaDOS, the evil AI, self-destructs just because you asked it to calculate the liar's paradox. And it can't do that because it does not do parallel computing. So this dialetheia, this idea of true contradictions, we could apply it to AI research to make the AI more like us, because we can think in parallel terms. We can, for example, when I tell you this sentence is false, you can think, wait, that might be true, but it also might be false. And you can think that at the same time. GLaDOS cannot think that at the same time because she has a CPU. She has to first calculate the falsity, then calculate the truth, then calculate the false, then calculate the truth. And it does that an infinite amount of times until you get like an error. So that's one example. That's one kind of intelligence that we humans have that AI doesn't have. And that's why we should maybe use dialetheic logic, paraconsistent logic, when we program our AIs, when we make our machine learning algorithms, so that we can make it more like the human brain and make the AI more convincing, more human in appearance and mannerism. So yeah, that's
definitely,
that's another way you can use it. Another idea is consciousness. So when we're trying to understand what makes a thing conscious, you could also use the liar's paradox, the dialetheia, because Roger Penrose, he's a physicist who says consciousness arises from these little things in your neurons called microtubules. You can Google this if you want. MICRO.
MICRO tubules.
Yeah. So these are like little tubules inside the axon of your neuron, and in these microtubules, there are these little like protein channels, right? They open and close, open and close. But what if there's a kind of coherence between these things opening and closing, such that it syncs up with other gates that are opening and closing to create conscious experience? So in a sense, the contradiction creates consciousness. The paraconsistent logic is the logic that we could use to describe consciousness. And Penrose himself says we need the traditional laws of physics don't work for explaining consciousness. We need to literally invent a new law of physics to explain consciousness. And that's another way in which it could be used. Another way dialetheia and paraconsistent logic could be used is Eastern religions. So how much do you know about like Eastern religions? They seem very mysterious, right? You don't really know what.
They don't seem that mysterious to me. I mean, it seems to me Eastern religions are people who have tried to solve the suffering problem by saying, detach, don't attach to anything, like ultra minimalism, don't care about things, don't try, and you won't have any disappointments in life because you're not going to care about anything anyway. So, and then eventually just die and maybe you'll reincarnate. No, they're not even. It's just, I don't know. I don't like it. So yeah, that's I think you very much do understand the Buddhist ethics, but what I'm talking about is the Buddhist metaphysics. So the Buddhist metaphysics is a little different from the ethics. It's about the way in which we understand reality, the way in which we understand physics. And I think Buddhism got a lot of physics right. And also this relates back to the nothing. So is there really such a thing as nothing? Is there really such a thing as everything?
Well, the Buddha says that is there such a thing as something? And the way he does this is it's called the Chatuskati, or the tetralemma. So the way this works is around the same time that Aristotle lived, and he was developing these three laws of logic. He's developing the law of identity, right? It says A equals A, the law of identity. A thing must be a thing. So it's like what you were talking about. If you share all your same properties, then you are Rowan. If you put Rowan somewhere else, if you make a copy of Rowan in a different part of space and time, it's no longer Rowan because it's missing one property, which is coordinates, the space-time coordinates. That's the law of identity. A thing must be a thing. Aristotle's second law was the law of excluded middle. So you have to a thing can only be true or false. There's no third thing it can be. You can't have like a blah, 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 or blah, blah, whatever, or maybe. There's no maybe. There's just true and false, nothing else. That's the law of excluded middle. Then Aristotle's third law, like I said, was the law of contradiction. So it can't be true and false at the same time. But as we just discussed, sometimes it can be. Sometimes it's very useful to use that. The Buddha went even further, and he says, not only can we doubt this third law, we can also doubt the second law, which says truthity and falsity are the only options. And this is where the Chatuskati comes in. So let me look this up. So in the sutras, which is like the Buddhist writings, one of the Buddha's students walks up to him and says, Master Gautama, does Master hold the view that after death, a Tathagata exists? A Tathagata is where only one thing is true and anything else is false. The Buddha responds, Vacha, I do not hold the view that a Tathagata exists after death, nor do I view that a Tathagata does not exist. I also do not hold the view that a Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist, nor do I hold the view that a Tathagata exists and does not exist. So that sounds like very fucking woo-woo mysterious here, but what he's saying is what he basically did was he gave an argument to doubt the law of excluded middle. He's saying that, well, you could the fact that things can be true and false at the same time means maybe you could use that to doubt the law of excluded middle. So now we have four possibilities. That's why it's called the tetralemma, the four corners. It's called the four corners argument, what he gives here. And it could be written like this. Either false, either true and false, or either not true and not false. And what this leads is the first foundation of Buddhism. It's called shunyata. Shunyata doesn't mean nothing. It means not yet a thing. And Buddha says that's the base of reality, in which all other realities are built on top of. So whether you got your fucking multiverse, your your God doing things, you got sentience, you got Big Bang or whatever the fuck you're gonna put in your universe. He says this is the base environment where you'll construct it. It's called shunyata, or not yet a thing. And people interpret this as nihilism. But it's not really nihilism because it's not nothing. It's not nothingness. It's pure potentiality, and that's very different from nothingness because it means it can become anything. It's more.
I think I had my idea of Middle Eastern religions and stuff influenced negatively by these four people: Deepak Chopra.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Eckhart Tolle, Alan Watts, and Sam Harris. I've not found a Middle Eastern Buddhist type person that is obsessed with living forever. Like you are. You're I wouldn't call you a Middle Eastern person, but you're you draw a lot upon that stuff. But you want to live forever, so you're different. These other people, every other Middle Eastern type Buddhist person, they all freaking don't care about living forever. It's like a commonality. It's a common thread throughout that group of people.
Yeah, well, I don't think they just haven't realized the true. They haven't grasped the true nature of what it means to be not yet a thing. They close off certain possibilities. They close off certain ways of living, and I don't like that. That's also what Deleuze didn't like that.
I think it stems from the philosophy in Buddhism that is non-attachment philosophy. I think it all stems from there. Because in Buddhism, it's this idea you don't need to attach to anything because it's going to cause suffering. So why even attach to life? Just accept it and just embrace the death, embrace what is. It's just and also, if you notice in Buddhism, it's this focus on the present moment. Yeah. The present. They don't want you thinking about the future because the future is going to cause suffering. Thinking about the future, thinking about stressing about death. That's not what Buddhism's about. Buddhism's just focus on the present. Just be in the present. Like, I don't
So
know. It's not. That's not a
yeah,
smart.
so let's get
It's
into
not
the
smart.
Buddhist ethics. So that's what we're going to argue about now. Is so we talked about the Buddhist metaphysics, which is Shunyata and the Chatuskati and the four corners, but let's get to the Four Noble Truths. So the four, I don't know why Buddha really liked the number four, but whatever. Um, uh,
I like the number 4. That's my number.
yeah, um, he likes the number eight too, eightfold path, but whatever. He says, first noble truth: all life is suffering. Second noble truth: all suffering comes from desire. All desire comes from the ego. To get rid of the ego, you do the eightfold path. That's the Four Noble Truths. Here's the problem, though, is he doesn't properly define desire. He just thinks it's a thing humans can have and that animals don't have. He doesn't draw the line between where various kinds of consciousness actualize themselves. For instance, does a flower grow because a flower wants to grow, or does a flower grow because that's just the like the how would I say the actualization of that species, the way that species actualizes itself, the way it creates more entropy is by growing. That's how the flower exists. What about fish? The fish really like swim around because of desire, or is it just a more complex way that the flower can grow? And the same with humans is I think the central way that humans actualize themselves is changing their own biology. So we breed fucking cattle. Well, it's not changing our biology, but we eat the fucking cattle and we breed the cattle. We train wolves. We put jewelry and shit on ourselves. We invent language and then we use the language to change our minds. That's a kind of very primitive bioengineering. Language is the first singularity. The second singularity was agriculture. We changed the way in which we interface with the environment, and then we changed our diet. We changed the nature of our species is to change our own biology. And I don't think that's the same thing as desire. It's just something we do. I don't feel like ashamed at all for wanting to change my biology. I think even if I didn't want it, I'd still do it. It's not like these primitive cavemen wanted to invent language. They just did. They just kind of did. So I really want to distinguish between like compulsions and desires. How long do you have to meditate on something? How long do you have to analyze something before it becomes a desire rather than a compulsion? And I don't think we really make that distinction very clear in the Buddhist ethics. So that's why I think there needs to be like a lot of work done in the four noble truths to clarify what the fuck we're talking about. But I see where you're coming.
But in Buddhism, I'm curious, how do they deal with morality? Do they say there's a right or wrong?
Yeah, of course. Have you ever heard of the Dharma? The five precepts.
Dharma.
So the Dharma is the 5 precepts. You can't drink. You can't steal. You can't no singing, dancing, or listening to music. Wow, he's kind of like Plato. He really doesn't fucking like art.
So interesting.
But,
so if they're into morality, then yes. How can they be claiming to be non-attached? Because if you're attached, they're attached to morality. So they're contradicting their own self just right there. They're attached to morality. Therefore, if they're attached to morality, therefore, if they would behave immoral, they're going to suffer. So they're attached. Like it's the same thing. They have to live with suffering unless they're perfectly moral. So how do they deal with that?
Wait,
why are they attached to morality?
I don't know if we should get into this right now, but we could go over 2,000 years of Buddhism and all the Buddhist philosophers who responded to this argument you just made. But maybe we'll keep it short. Okay, so Buddhism was started around the same time that Aristotle lived, right? So like 500 BC. And then after that, it kind of died down for a little bit. And then you got the first Buddhist king, Ashoka. So he was the king of India, and he united all of India. But in the process of uniting India, he had to kill like women and children, and like he had to do a lot of very not nice things, and it like traumatized him. It gave him like the war gave him PTSD. And the way he overcame his PTSD was he met a Buddhist monk in the woods, and then sort of like reformed himself. And then as a king, he spread Buddhism throughout India, and he made it like the official state religion. So he's like, no killing cows, be nice to animals, be nice to each other, no stealing. He erected these pillars called the Pillars of Ashoka, which carried his law on it. And he also sent missionaries. He sent missionaries to Greece. He sent missionaries to Egypt. He sent missionaries to China. He sent missionaries to China. And they got as far as like Indonesia too. So this is where Buddhism really started to spread. But Ashoka, he was also the last Buddhist king. So he was the first Buddhist king and the last Buddhist king. And after ruling for 21 years, the Gupta dynasty, I don't know. I think it was the Maurya Empire. So they overthrow Ashoka. Well, after he dies, they overthrow his regime, and they're like, okay, we're Hindu again. You got all these like gods, and they do shit. So Hinduism's back. No more Buddhism. So Buddhism never really returns to India, but the missionaries who spread the ideas carried it far and wide. So then now that you have so many different kinds of Buddhism, you have what's called Theravada Buddhism, which is in like Indonesia and Burma, Vietnam, like that general, like, no, not Vietnam, Burma, Thailand.
Wait, let me interrupt you here for a second. Isn't it the Buddhists who say don't desire things, don't
That
desire,
depends. That
right?
depends. So I'm getting to that.
Really?
So,
What do they say you should desire then? I'm just curious.
what you should desire is like clarity. Like you should desire like consciousness of reality. You should desire clarity of mind. You should want to be, because only
So
then can you feel your
why do they
attachment
make
to inanimate objects.
why do they make an exception for that?
That's
That's
interesting.
what I'm saying. So they say don't desire everything else, but just desire this. Oh, clarity, yeah. Like this seems like arbitrary. Why are they just
So Alan
like
Watts.
they decide all the rules. They decide, oh yeah, desire this, people. Don't desire all this. Oh no, but just this. Like what the heck? Where'd they
Yeah,
go?
so Alan Watts, the philosopher you responded to, he's a what you would call a Zen Buddhist. So Zen Buddhism mixes Buddhism with Taoism. So Taoism, how much do you know about Lao Tzu? So Lao Tzu,
I had a lot of quotes of his. In one time in my life, I was collecting quotes from all these different philosophers, and he was one that actually appeared like he had a lot of good things to say. I remember that. I can't remember what they are, but he said smart things.
yeah, so after Ashoka fell, all the Buddhist libraries and Abhidharma schools, they were burned and the monks were slaughtered. So we don't really have very good records of what the original Buddha meant by desire. We have like the Tripitaka, which is like the Buddhist Bible, but a lot of that was destroyed when the libraries were burned by the Maurya dynasty. So the Theravada Buddhism, that was one interpretation. Mahayana Buddhism, this is the Buddhism that went to China. So the missionaries that brought it to China created this other variant of it, and it mixed with, and then that spread to Japan. So have you heard the story of Zen Master Dogen? This is it's a movie you could watch. Go to YouTube or go to Google Images. Zen Master Dogen.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a movie about like
Okay.
what is the correct interpretation of Buddhism, and it's kind of like describes this Alan Watts type vision of reality. So it's the story is about a guy named Dogen, and he goes to China to talk to the Mahayana Buddhists, and he goes back to retrieve some texts which talked about like what the original Buddhism meant, and then when he returns to Japan, he finds like the Buddhist monks there doing some really fucked up shit. So there's this place called Mount Hiei, and that's where there's a Buddhist monastery. The Mount Hiei Buddhists, they're like, oh, you shouldn't desire anything. Nothing matters. They're kind of like nihilist Buddhists. So they start like raping and killing people, and they start like dragging women off and like pillaging.
Wow.
And just because they,
So it's like Satanism.
yeah,
It's like a satanic Buddhism.
you could call it like dark Buddhism, which is like Ayn Rand's interpretation of Buddhism or whatever. But it's like
It sounds like do what thou
exactly
wilt.
do what
Sounds
thou
like
wilt.
just the
It's just like
satanic
don't
message.
desire anything. So all that matters is your animal urges.
Right.
Because here's the difference between a compulsion and a desire. If I'm just about my compulsions and not desires, my compulsion is to like fuck, eat, shit, sleep. My functions. So if I'm rejecting my desire, I'm gonna go do these fucking things. And when Zen Master Dogen comes back with the Buddhist texts, he's like, holy shit, these people on Mount Hiei are doing everything fucking wrong, the wrong way. That's not how the original Buddhist monasteries were doing things. Because you know, like the Shaolin monks, right? They're another type of Buddhist where they say, actually, you should desire to exist, so you should defend yourself. Like if the bandits attack you, you should get weapons, train fucking kung fu shit, and then fight off the bandits. So there are versions of Buddhism that are pro-life extension and like anti-death. So there's so many different versions
Right.
of Buddhism. But
I was being way too simplistic. There's obviously so many different
so
versions.
one variant that Zen Master Dogen comes back with is the one that's mixed with Taoism. And Taoism says you have this idea of wu wei, meaning what it means to not desire is to just go with the flow. Like a river doesn't try to push against reality. You should just kind of accept reality. You should like living. Living is okay, but you should you shouldn't try to like get engaged in these overly idealistic ways of changing the world. And you definitely shouldn't harm other human beings who are just trying to do their wu wei or trying to like go with their flow. And this is where he clashes with the Mount Hiei monks. So they burn his temple in the movie, and they drive him out. So he meets like Dogen meets like a widow who was like she was like a prostitute, and like she was with a samurai, and then the samurai was kind of a deadbeat dad who like didn't really take care of them, and he like gambled away all his money. So like there was not a lot of spiritual growth in this kind of Buddhism. And then she goes with him to become like a Buddhist nun, and then they engage in the practice of zazen, which is like where they like sort of dissolve their ego and feel a sense of connection to their environment. And it's sort of about how he develops the Japanese Buddhism, Zen Master Dogen. So if you want to understand like what Alan Watts is saying better, I guess you could watch that movie. It's not very high quality, but you know.
That's another thing that's kind of iffy, on my opinion, big iffy, is dissolving your ego, which seems to be a Buddhist Middle Eastern thing, because to me, if you dissolve your ego, there would be no more desire to live. Like the whole point of living, the whole point of having the ego is that it's attached to things. That's what the ego is. It attaches to things and wants to live and has an identity, and that's part of why we want to live.
So yeah, I'm going to try and define the ego.
So if you dissolve your ego, you might just like not, you might lose your will to live.
So I'm going to try and like talk about the ego without going through like 2,000 years of Buddhist history, because I know that's like probably very boring to you, but here's what I think the ego is. So what is validation? Validation is how we feel good about ourselves, right? It's how we move through. Humans are social beings. We move through reality by interacting with people. And validation plays a large role in that. But where do you get your validation from? Where do you get the sense that like I'm a human being whose life has value? Where do you get that? Do you need other people to tell you that? And that's what I call the ego, is when you rely on the external world for validation of yourself. That's why like people say like, oh, you have such a big ego, or you're being so egotistical. It's like people who are just so dependent on attention and on like people's perception of them. I don't really give a shit if you hate me or if you like me or whatever, because I already have like validation from within myself. So I don't really need an ego to get through life. So for me, it's just a question of where your validation comes from. It doesn't really have any connection to like whether or not you want to stay alive. Because for me, like staying alive, again, it's a compulsion. If I walk out in the street and then a car is speeding towards me, I'm going to be like, oh shit, just out of reflex, I'll jump away. And if you add up all these little reflexes throughout the day, you start to get a kind of behavior that resembles life extension. So it's not, I think you can still follow like the Taoist concept of Wu Wei without like relying on other people's, but still having an internal source of validation.
So to me, you've just redefined ego in a very unique way that I've never really heard defined that way. You make it sound very bad.
Oh yeah, so ego is
so
like
I've heard. Yeah.
It's your social identity.
I've heard ego being defined in different ways that makes it sound not as bad. A lot of different ways. Yeah.
Another way you can define ego is that it's your identity. So is your identity closed or open? If your identity is an open book, I could say like that's a way to dissolve the ego, and that's what I like to have is I've had so many different identities in my life, and I actually kind of like that I'm able to do that. So I try not to lock myself into one way of being. I try not to become like overly nationalistic or overly committed to like one dogma or overly committed to one philosophy or one religion. I try not to like sort of harden my life into a caste. I want to be kind of, I want to allow for change to happen. So that's another way of dissolving your ego. It depends on like which school of Buddhism. So we talked about Mahayana, Theravada, Zen. There's also a version of Tibetan Buddhism. What's it called? Tibetan Buddhism. Fuck. So this is like the Dalai Lama, right?
Mm-hmm.
You ever heard of the movie 7 Years in Tibet with Brad Pitt?
I think I have heard of it. I don't think I saw it, but yeah.
Yeah. So what's this called?
So you don't think that? So you separate the ego from survival?
Yes.
You're saying you don't need the ego to survive, and therefore why have it?
There is a social you and an actual you. The actual you, in my opinion, can still exist without the social you. The social you can be an open book, and you don't have to rely on other people to create you. You don't have to be dependent on validation from other people. You can create that from within yourself. And I think you see this everywhere, like Diogenes, Jesus, the Buddha himself, where you see this pattern of this specific type of person who just doesn't give a shit what anyone else thinks, and they kind of just do whatever they want, regardless of like what their parents tell them to, what their like religion tells them to, what their fucking like nation or kingdom tells them to do. It's kind of like this very anarchistic attitude to life, and I think that's one way you can live that is less dependent.
Basically, you're saying, do what thou wilt. Just kidding.
That's different, because doing what thou wilt, if it interferes with other people's ability to do what thou wilt, is it really do what thou wilt? There's a lot of questions here we need answering.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of time these structures, like national structures, religious structures, a lot of the time they are based on like external validation. Somebody just makes it up, and it has no connection to reality. Like the alt-right, like these people, they have a very romanticized vision of the past, like the 1950s. I don't think the 1950s were as good as they make them out to be. A lot of people in the 1950s like were poor. Like, you know that picture of like the nuclear family with like the wife and the pie and the kids and the picnic.
Yeah.
I've actually like a lot of like my friends' grandparents and even my own grandparents, like I've tried to like look at how they lived, and you start to realize a particular pattern that everybody in like the 1950s, they did have one parent working, but they also had like very small houses. Like my grandfather's house was only like, I think like 3 rooms, something like that, and that was considered middle class. And even in America, like these were usually like 1-story houses. You had like 1 car, a garage, and like maybe the kids' room, and then the parents' room, and like a kitchen, and that's it. It wasn't as like wealthy or affluent as they made it out to be. And a lot of the time, the people were miserable. They just had to put on a nice smile, because that's what the social convention of the time required. And another thing is the men, I think men are actually more free than they were in the 1950s. I know there's like this huge like manosphere thing, like, oh, we need to go back to the 1950s because it was better for men. I was like, oh, was it really? Because I mean, women had like a lot more power over your life. Like you, if it wasn't working out with the woman, you can't just like sort of phase out of the relationship. They can just divorce you and take all your shit. Whereas now you have like, I know like the dating hookup culture is kind of bullshit, but it does allow you to be more careful about who you choose to be with, and it allows you to do test runs to see if they're right for you. In the 1950s, there was no such thing. You weren't allowed to have sex until you married somebody, and in doing so, you trap yourself. So,
oh my gosh, you're promoting having sexual test runs with girls before you marry them. Runs,
but sex is a part of relationships. A lot of people deny that. I think it's very, very core to relationships. If you like, for example, if like one of you just doesn't want to like, if one of you just doesn't want to fuck, it's gonna be like hard having a relationship with that person, because they view you differently. Like they view the relationship differently than you view it. Like intimacy is very important, and some of that was repressed in the 1950s. So you weren't really able to gauge whether you would be happy with someone. And I think in the modern era, a lot of that has been simplified. It's a lot easier to avoid the trap of like marriage and divorce and whatnot.
So what kind of test runs are you talking about, if not sexual? What are you talking about then? Like, what do you mean? Like living with them?
So let's say you date someone when you're a teenager, and then once they go to college, they decide they want a completely fucking different life that's incompatible with your life. Like, let's say you're dating someone as a teenager, and then they become a deathist. What would you do, Rowan? Would you be like, oh shit, I should probably go find somebody else because this life extension thing is very important for me, so I should probably let her down gently yes. phase out this relationship. But let's teleport you back to the time in 1950s where you're not allowed to do that. You are basically fucked. You have to live with a person you don't like for the rest of your life. And
well, not unless you marry them not unless you marry them.
You kind of had to start a relationship, because if you were having a relationship that lasted like longer than a year, you'd get kind of weird looks from the community, like, oh, what are you guys doing? Are you having sex before marriage and whatnot? You were kind of pressured. There was more social pressure to get married. And like, let's say I lived in the 1950s.
But still, you didn't have to.
I would have a very low status in society because I'm not married in my 20s. Like you lose fucking like social credit as a male if you're not married. Same with like a female, you lose social credit. But what if you just haven't found the right person? And like there's just so much pressure to get into relationships. But let's talk about like the rising divorce rate, right? So the boomers have a 50% divorce rate. That's pretty fucking bad, right? But is it really different in the 1950s? Because in the 1950s you didn't have very good divorce laws. So all the boomers who would have been divorced just fucking take a bunch of antidepressants and soldier through it. And even though they're fucking miserable. So I think there is a positive function to divorce. It's just that the boomers really didn't handle relationships well. They were a very materialistic, entitled, lazy generation. And I think there's more potential for change here now that we have new ways of organizing, new social structures to improve society. But I guess what I'm getting at is that sometimes the past isn't as idealized as you make it out to be because you weren't there.
Understand? 100% agree. And the 50s also, like their medical technology was worse. Like everything was like they didn't have freaking internet. Like no, it's ridiculous. We wouldn't want to go back to the 50s. Yeah, but I guess there's some aspects. I think the alt-right wants to bring back the purity. Like people were more chaste. They didn't have a lot of sex before marriage. That purity. That's the nice part about the 50s.
I think a lot of that also comes from this idea of social validation. Is nowadays, like back in the day, you had to repress sex if you wanted social credit. Now you have to have as much fucking sex as possible if you want social credit. And if you don't, they'll call you an incel. Not that I give a shit. That's what it means to dissolve the ego, is to just be like, okay, whatever. Okay, Coomer. Just say okay, Coomer. Whenever people demand that you fucking have sex to validate yourself socially. There's other things that are pleasurable too. Like it's sure it's good to have it, but at the cost of sacrificing everything else. I mean, a lot of it is just living your life on your own terms. It's just basic like existential shit that Nietzsche and Sartre were trying to tell us.
Right.
It's a radical.
Yeah. What's a Coomer again?
What's a Coomer? Google it. Google Images. The Coomer is the guy who's like addicted to porn, and he defines his whole life around like sex.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of like I like the Coomer meme because it's a way to like denigrate these people who are trying to like make your like belt count or notch count like the defining factor of your identity. Another thing is like PUAs. Right. I really fucking hate the PUAs. Basically, they're incels who have learned a couple fancy tricks from Neil Strauss's book, The Game. And by tricks, I literally mean tricks, like ways in which you can be more sexually forceful, so the woman will have sex with you just to get the fuck away from you, or just so you'd back the fuck off, or just so like you wouldn't fucking murder her or whatever. It's ways to like psychologically manipulate them into fucking you, and then they make such a big deal out of it. Like they base their entire identity around that. So this is what I mean by having an ego: is you structure your identity around like one trivial activity, and then let's say a time comes when that trivial activity doesn't have the social weight it once had. You're gonna suffer a lot. So that's what I mean by getting attached to things. I don't get attached to modes of being. I explore them to see what they're like, and then I create lines of flight to other ways of being. That's what it means to dissolve your ego. That's what it means to not be attached. It's not that I'm not attached to life, because I am life. I am a living thing. Like it's not possible to like detach from what you are. Like the way in which I perceive the world is facilitated by the fact that I get out of the fucking way when a car is coming at me, right? So I don't think that's what the Buddha meant by getting rid of your ego. And again, this is just my opinion because we don't have a lot of very good historical records about what he actually meant. But I think what he meant is don't try to stratify yourself into this one identity of like sleeping with as many chicks as possible, because when that thing becomes worthless, when you become old and no one wants to fuck you anymore, you suffer. That's where suffering comes from. Suffering comes from the ego, because you've created this identity where it says I can only do this one thing, and everything in my life will evolve around this one thing, when it should be revolving around you, like you, the being who's alive. It's in a sense
that makes sense.
It could be more life affirming. That's why I think Buddhism is closer to nihilism. Of course, there's Buddhists who will debate me about that, but there's other Buddhists who will agree with me. It's really hard to talk about like such a diverse religion. It's like saying all Christianity is Catholicism. Like that would probably piss you off, right? You'd be like, oh, it's way more diverse than Catholicism. or it's like saying all
Right.
Islam is Wahhabism, which is like ISIS. Obviously, there's Sunni Islam, Shia Islam. The most interesting sect of Islam, I think, is the Sufis, because they're kind of like Gnostics for Islam, and they're like very philosophical, and they're kind of like mystics. They have a very weird interpretation of Islam, which is interesting to explore. But you shouldn't just reduce all religions down to one interpretation. Man, could you imagine what
Yeah.
Christians would how pissed Christians would be if you compared them all to like Mormonism? You said like, oh, Mormonism is all Christians.
Yeah.
So that's just the same thing I want to get across with the ego is like a lot of people are still Buddhists. I think there's like 500 million Buddhists around the world, and I'm pretty sure they don't all believe the same thing Alan Watts does. So just a thought.
Right. Yeah, no, the way you explain it that way definitely makes the Buddhism seem a lot less bad.
Yeah, I mean, like also like there's even Buddhists who are fascist. Like for example, the Rohingya Muslims when they came into Myanmar, a lot of the Buddhists are like, wait, are we just gonna sit around while these people come in and like rape and kill us? How about we form like death squads, like fascist death squads and shit, and fight them? So that's like not a thing you would imagine an Alan Watts type Buddhist doing. That's how radically different these sects of Buddhism can get. Also, like the Shaolin monks, like, hey, aren't you supposed to not harm living things by doing this kung fu shit to kill bandits? But whatever. If
Right.
you're interested in like philosophy and the military at once, become like a Shaolin monk. That's like one way you can explore that life, so to speak.
Right. Yep. Still need to see that Tom Cruise movie, the samurai movie. I didn't
Oh, the
see that one.
Last Samurai.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
It's a very
Heard it's good.
actually, if you're alt right, you'll really like that movie. It's one of those reject modernity, return to tradition type films.
Well, I'm not all right.
Well, that depends on what we mean by that, because I was actually like very optimistic about it, because the alt right used to mean something very different in 2015 than it did in 2016. In 2015, it just meant any right winger who wasn't a neoconservative. So if you were a libertarian, if you were like anarcho-capitalist, if you were like monarchist, if you were a Nazi, if you were like a paleocon, if you were like a cowboy, fucking constitutionalist, um, the neocons don't represent you. They're basically Trotskyites for the right wing, and all they care about is like war and like looting the countries that they make war with. That's what conservatism. That's what conservatism meant in the past 30 years. And the alt right was just whatever opposed that. And then Charlottesville happened, and then all alt righters became like Nazis or traditionalists. So it's
Right.
I definitely wouldn't consider myself a traditionalist, for the very fact that I think you're closing off so many paths to improvement by becoming a traditionalist. You're not allowing for things that should change to change, because sometimes the environment changes and you must respond to your environment when it changes. And you know what that requires? Sometimes
Right.
that requires violating tradition. If climate change really takes off, you're definitely going to have to fucking violate tradition. You're going to have to live in a different way than you did before. So that's why I think this like Ted Kaczynski reject modernity, embrace tradition is kind of like a stupid way to like conceptualize humanity. It's not nuanced enough to account for the fact that we are nature. There's no humans versus nature. Humans are nature, and when nature thrives, we thrive. So
Right.
I mean, you can be a traditionalist if you
I
want.
could
I'm not
s-
like criticizing that. I'm just saying that.
No, I mean
Just
I'm
saying
not. I agree.
yeah,
It's too limiting.
yeah.
You gotta evolve, adapt or
I'm just
die,
saying that like that's
right?
what became of the alt right is they used to be a coalition of all non neoconservatives that devolved into
Mhm.
just traditionalists and nobody else. Like sometimes I'll pay
Right.
on
No.
my page, I'll like my Twitter, I'll post like anti porn memes and like anti OnlyFans. Like I really don't like OnlyFans. I think it exploits it exploits men's like some very vulnerable men, like simps. We call them simps, or maybe disabled men who don't understand what they're paying for. They don't understand that porn is free on the internet, and they're just paying tens of thousands of dollars to these e-girls. I think it's a very unethical practice. I don't think we should call these people sex workers. They're more like sex merchants or sex capitalists who are like stealing your surplus labor or whatever. Um, I'm gonna
Parasites.
sometimes
Sex
yeah
parasites.
sometimes I'll
Succubuses.
criticize the sex parasites or whatever who pretend that they're doing labor when they just take like one nudie photo, copy it a million times, and make like $10,000 a week. I don't think that's work. That's just no different than like a landlord or like a pedophile who exploits the naivete of children to do pedophilia. you're exploiting the naivete of simps to take advantage of simps and steal their money. So I definitely don't think like the OnlyFans is very ethical. But people will be like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, you must be a traditionalist. I'm like, no, I'm not a traditionalist. God damn it. So sometimes these people will like identify me as like agreeing with them, and they'll be like, oh yeah, Thought Patrol, am I right? And then they'll share like Handmaid's Tale memes, like we need to get women back in the kitchen. It's like, no, I'm not trying to get women back in the kitchen. I'm pro gender abolitionist, but not in the feminist way, because feminists aren't really gender abolitionists. People are starting to call them like TERFs, which is like they exclude transgender people. They exclude men who don't have masculine characteristics. Like, for example, if you're a man and you like to show emotion, feminists will fucking hate you. Like, they're like, oh no, we're only abolishing the characteristics of gender that we want to abolish. So we're going to keep divorce, we're going to keep alimony, we're going to keep child support, even though we're more than capable of getting a job. It's not real gender abolitionism. So that's why I wouldn't, at least modern.
And how does it benefit them if men don't show their emotions?
No, they just it's not that it doesn't benefit them. It's just they openly discourage it. Like they'll be like, "Oh yeah, you're a bitch because you like to cry." That seems completely antithetical to gender abolitionism. It's again the ego. You want to transcend the ego. You're like, I'm going to create this. I'm going to explore this new identity where I'm a man and I get to cry, and a lot of feminists will not let you explore that. Again, like the incel. Who likes to use the word incel the most? Feminists. And they do that when you don't pay for their OnlyFans account. They'll call you an incel. They'll be like, how dare you not buy my nudes? How dare you not buy my feet pics? Is that really gender abolitionism? Or are you really letting them construct their own gender identity? Or are you just trying to get them back into the fucking plantation where they have to conform to the male gender role of providing for you?
I bet a lot of feminists would not be the type of people that would condemn men for showing emotion, for instance. I mean, are you sure it's a fair portrayal of feminists?
No, a lot of them do. Especially like
really?
A lot of them hate trans people too. For example, like the transgender people who like, let's say,
because I'm trying to think of just like Emma Watson. She's like the classical feminist girl. She did this speech as
Emma Watson.
I doubt she would be the type of. She would encourage. I think a lot of these feminist girls, they would encourage guys to be more emotional.
This is where we should distinguish between like first wave feminism, second wave feminism, and third wave feminism. And like people will say there's no waves. I'm like, no, there absolutely is waves. And here's how it works. So you have the first wave, which is Wollstonecraft. We already talked about her. There's like Susan B. Anthony, the woman who got other women the right to vote. Simone de Beauvoir. This is where you start to get the second waves, because Simone de Beauvoir, she talks about like the female gender role is purely performative, and it's like it was forced upon them by society, and by changing society, they can have a different gender role. So that's when you start to get to second wave feminism, where they're like demanding like equal pay for equal work and whatnot. And then once you get to like the third wave feminism, this is where you get the like all men are rapists, all men are this, all men are that. Also, the idea that all sex is men raping is inherently prescribing a gender role to the person.
It seems like you're attacking a fringe element of feminism.
Yes,
not like
absolutely.
Mainstream.
Yes, feminism. A fringe element. So the fringe element is called the fringe element is called TERF, and TERF stands for like trans exclusionary radical femme.
So you do admit there's a more broader mainstream feminist movement that is like people like Emma Watson that are not saying like all men are rapists. They're more reasonable sounding.
Yeah. Again, the environment's going to change, so gender roles are going to have to change in reaction, so we can navigate our environment. Like there's going to be climate change and shit. There's going to be a lot more war, geopolitical conflict, and we need to find a way to respond to all this. And the way what TERFs are really after is they want to keep some of the gender roles that benefit them and get rid of everything else. And they don't like the idea that these men who are being like burdened with like alimony and divorce, they don't like that they're changing their gender identity, because it means they won't get fucking paid. Like if a TERF is married to a man and the man starts identifying as a woman, and in court he's like, yeah, I'm a woman, I get to keep 50% of my shit, and she's like, wait, no, of his shit, really fucking pissed, because it means you're siphoning money off of them. It's like you're stealing food from their mouths. Same with like changing the name on your driver's license. if you change the letter from M to F, like I could just go and change my driver's license to F, and then my insurance premiums would go down because I'm a woman driver rather than a male driver, and the insurance companies ascribe the gender role of men getting angry. So that's one instance where they don't like that you're blurring the lines between a man and a woman because the gender identity of women is what gives them their power, which I think kind of defeats the point of being a feminist, because originally it was like Simone de Beauvoir described, the whole goal of feminism became gender abolitionism, and then they're kind of like returning to the past where they're just like, okay, we do want there to be men and women, we just want to keep the parts of feminism that benefit us. So yeah, there's tons of things you could say about feminism, but I'd say there definitely is like an exploitative group of feminists who are only using it for like opportunistic reasons.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Let's try to end this soon. Getting too late.
Oh yeah, so what were we talking about before this? We got down to Buddhism.
Oh man, so many things. This has been freaking fascinating conversation.
What was before? Oh right, you were going to talk to me about your psychedelic.
Oh yeah,
yeah, sure. We can talk about that.
Sure, just a little bit, but basically, I want to talk about this more later, but I'll just tell you the briefs. So, this psychedelic substance I've been talking about is CBD oil. That's it, just straight up CBD oil. I feel that people say it's not psychedelic. I disagree. I think it is if you take enough of it. If you take enough CBD oil, I mean like massive doses of CBD oil, it's mind altering. It is amazing. But the thoughts, I would like you to try this. I would like you to experiment with taking high, way higher doses than anyone recommends. Like I'm talking off the charts high levels of CBD oil.
What brand do you take?
It does alter
what's your brand of CBD oil?
Now I'm taking a brand that I don't know what it is. It's just this like stuff that was made for pets. It was like CBD oils given to pets or something. It's cheaper, so I had tons of it. But I don't know. It's like my friend just brought it home. It was just a big tub of it. Just a big tub. I don't even know the brand, the label, nothing.
Holy shit. Big tub of CBD oil. So do you know like how many milligrams you took, or what's the unit of measurement, or how much?
I freaking don't, but I took lots of squirts of it, like 12 squirts, whole squirts, like this, like in a day over the course of 7 hours. I took like, let's say 12 of these. That's a lot because most people when they're taking CBD, they're taking like a few drops or something. Like I took like 12 of these, and this is not the first time I've done that. I've done that with a different type of CBD oil, which was supposed to have low THC. All the CBD oils I take, they're low THC or no THC. So I don't think it's the THC at this point, because this is the second type of CBD oil that has this effect. It totally changes the thoughts. You start having thoughts where I would describe them as thoughts where identity-changing thoughts. Like we're almost trying to you're able to see your identity, and if there's ever a way to change your identity, because people get their identity like locked in and stuff, and they have a hard time changing it. This is the type of thing I feel like, okay, this would allow you to make huge shifts in your life, like see what's your life like right in front of you, and just like, oh, if I make this change, it'll have a huge butterfly effect, and just little things you'd never thought of, and like it opens you up to different little things.
Already. This sounds like
it's something where it's like you start to see all the little things in your life that it's like, oh, I could just change this little thing. It's like it's actually an option. Like I could just change this thing, and then all this stuff would change in my future. And you start having weird thoughts where you can make connections, and just it is unbelievable.
That sounds
cool. And what's cool about it is you're conscious the whole time. You're not seeing anything. This is not a hallucination. This is like you're aware, but your thoughts are radically changed. And so it is this myth I keep on hearing about CBD oil. I've never heard anyone. I've looked at all kinds of testimonials of people with CBD oil. I've never heard CBD oil described in this way, where it's mind altering. Everyone describes CBD oil as though it is non-psychoactive.
It's like relaxing, right? That's the description they.
Yeah, That's what they'll say. Oh, it's relaxing. Oh, it'll put you to sleep. Oh, here's the other thing. If you really want to get this effect, you have to take a lot, but you cannot go to sleep. So that's the other thing. If a lot of people, I think, if they do take a lot of CBD oil, they'll just fall asleep. And if you're having you won't get the effect because you have to be awake while you're having the massive dose of CBD oil. You have to be awake, so you have to fight through the sleepiness. You have to fight through that, and I think a lot of people take enough CBD oil. It does make you really tired, but you have to fight through that tiredness.
Are you sure
you
it's
cannot sleep
CBD
otherwise?
oil? Are you sure it's CBD oil and not hemp oil?
100%. Hemp oil is like a black tar.
Yeah.
That is what people take for cancer, things like that. It's Rick Simpson's hemp oil. It's that process. It's like a black tar. This is not. This is absolutely CBD oil.
Okay.
They wouldn't be giving pets Rick Simpson's hemp oil.
Google Nootropics Depot CBD oil. So they got like this. I'm on the page right now. They got this like kind of dripper thing.
Nootropics oils.
Nootropics
CBD oil.
DE.
Oh, Nootropics. Yeah, Depot CBD oil. But
Yeah, so
honestly, this what I'm describing is
They
amazing.
got the soft gels and they got the kind of drip. Which do you think I should get?
Don't even get this yet because you should get it. Well, I'm gonna get it cheaper. I'm gonna buy lots of CBD oil. I'm planning already a place to get like huge amount. You should go in with me, and that way you don't have to pay these extra prices.
Oh fuck yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, because I'm gonna get a bunch of it. I'm talking like the amount I'm getting is at least $1,000 worth, and you get much more for your money, and it'll be concentrated, and that way it's just much cheaper. When you buy it from these places, they just charge so much, and you don't even know if you're getting.
We should get Brent and Max on board with this. I'll drive up there and I'll bring some.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you,
I'll bring some of my stuff too, and then we could trade.
CBD oil is so much untapped potential. It's ridiculous. It's like right in front of our faces, and we've all become kind of numb to it. It's like, oh, you hear it everywhere. Oh, it's just CBD oil. Like, it's just we've become numb to it, but it's like way undertapped.
It's the weed legalization. It's the fact that it's legal is.
Yes, it's legal, and it's about quantity. I don't think much people are taking the quantities of this stuff that you could take, and it does something completely different when you take enough of it. It is mind altering to, I would say, a good extent. It does kind of make you a little like almost your thoughts are so like open in a way where it's almost like you could spiral down a very negative path. So in that way, it could like make someone like a little paranoid about
for you, CBD oil is kind of like potentiality glasses. It can be good potential, or bad potential.
I think so. I think anything that is like obviously altering your mind, it does make you a little paranoid. Like, oh, is this what's gonna happen? It's just in other people, maybe it wouldn't make them paranoid at all. So I don't think it's fair to say this is the same type of paranoia that THC causes, because it's just not. I doubt that it is. I've never done massive amounts of. Well, maybe I did one time on accident, but it's not that. This is something different, and it's amazing.
Shit.
So can't wait for you to try it and stuff.
Let's do that. You want to do one more thing before we end it? So,
yeah,
we could respond to a video. Like some boomer made a video attacking my video, so we can respond to that if you want. Here, let me link it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Do you have Facebook open?
Let's see here. Facebook. I do have Facebook open. Yeah, just think about the potential of this.
Yeah.
Okay, CBD. The fact that it's legal and it's mind altering, it's the type of thing where I feel like it could make people who are like seriously addicted to something like change that, break that pattern. It feels like a pattern breaking type of thing. So we could use this in a therapy setting, like we had 10 people mega dose on CBD and see the type of changes that occur in their life, positive changes, and also seeing how the crazy thoughts that come out of that group of people, and it's all legal. You can just have 10 people come into a room,
Do you think?
Massive
Do you
dose
think it
on
would be? Do you
CBD.
think it'd be wise to do a live stream on that? Do you think your thoughts are coherent enough to like live stream with it? Because we could show people, we could show the audience what it's like to be on it.
Oh, live stream while I'm on it?
I've never megadosed CBD oil before, so I wasn't aware there were this many psychedelic
Oh, I'm totally
effects.
coherent enough. Oh, I'm 100% coherent enough. I am. Because, like I said, it's not like a trip. It's not like you're going down a K-hole.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like nothing like that. It's just, it is very strange, though. Because it's like, you're having thoughts where it's like, oh, that's not normal. Like, I don't have those thoughts. You know, it changes your thoughts.
Yeah.
So, in very profound ways.
Yeah, I'll drive up there and we'll try it. It sounds awesome.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
That way we don't have to have we could use like the same camera. We don't have to have like the back and forth. You want to respond to some questions? I'm just going to go to the bathroom real quick.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see here. Questions. Let me see what the questions are. Not many questions, but let me see. Okay, questions. Okay, so Naratu was here. Yeah, so Naratu's saying the brain is plastic, but it's limited. It can recover damaged parts, but not super well. Right. And here's something actually that ties in right with CBD oil. I heard that if you ever get massive brain damage, if you take like a trauma to your brain, like a concussion or whatever, if you take enough CBD oil at the time, it's going to drastically increase the chance that you're not going to get super brain damage. So CBD oil is an anti-inflammatory to the brain. It's like one of the best anti-inflammatories to the brain, and it helps the brain heal from damage and trauma and things like that. So it's awesome. And it's even neurogenic. It increases neuron growth. That's powerful. Salve says, if humans are the only animals aware of death, then how do you explain predators killing animals until they stop moving, or elephants mourning with dead remains of their kind? Humans. I don't think humans are the only animals aware of death. I think elephants. I think that is a good evidence that the elephants are aware of death. They're mourning their dead. You know, I think chimpanzees can be aware of death too. I don't think humans are the only animals aware of death at all. Just Josu Olivia says, "Hey there, Eternal Life fan. I was an Eternal Life fan way before I ever met you. So when I saw you here, I understood what you meant by it. Oh, that's awesome. Eternal life is the #1 most important goal ever.
Yo.
Focus on living forever."
What I miss?
Hey. Just answered every question but the last one.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, I posted I shared the link on Facebook. Somebody contacted me on over Twitter and told me this guy responded to my videos. He said he was like an evangelical Christian type. So I haven't watched the full.
Okay.
I haven't watched the full thing, but I saw a little bit of it at the start.
All right, let's go for it. Let's discuss it. You gonna send me a link?
Yeah, it's in Facebook. Oh, what the hell? You changed the title. I could swear it said something else before it said this. Whatever. It says COV-19. Oh, you know what? Yeah. COV-19 back to human. That's the name of the video. I put it in the Facebook. But I could put it in the Skype.
All right.
Okay, Skype.
Alrighty. Let's see here.
How long is it? I think it was. I don't remember how long it was when I looked at it.
Let's see here. Okie dokie. Alright, let's switch views here. I should share my screen with you.
Yeah,
guys
so
we can
holy
watch
shit,
at
this
the
guy
exact
has
same
a
time.
big channel. So he's got like 100,000 subscribers. Damn, this channel's like 3 times the size of mine.
Wow, you're right.
It's a big
This-
channel.
So this video is about your video, and it's
Yeah, it
got
was
100,000
It was a
views.
different title. I think he changed the title because he talks about the virus in it too. So whatever, we could go over it.
Uh-huh.
I don't know about like what kinds of arguments he uses, but I think it's like a hot take from like some evangelical boomer about like how I'm some satanic Illuminati conspiracy theorist who hates baby Jesus.
Oh my god. Oh my gosh.
Oh man,
Okay, here we go. Let me share my screen.
maybe I should. I need my whiskey bottle. Get through this. No, never mind. Keep up. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Look at you.
Oh, holy shit.
Yeah, I guess you took the hard road. Me too. You'd think we'd learn.
Skip ahead a little bit.
No, all in the name of progress, right?
2,500
Maybe like-
years ago,
maybe like 2 minutes
Sun
ahead.
Tzu, called Art of War.
A little bit further ahead.
Spiritual wickedness.
I think he rambles on about like some movie, and that's as far as I got.
Believe that. Even Christians,
Mm-hmm.
they forget about that part of the spiritual side. They think it's either Democrats or Republicans.
Should I skip ahead
Yeah, a
too?
little bit,
More?
yeah.
Right around.
It's like 4 minutes
So,
maybe.
How dare I get in?
Oh, it's the all-seeing eye.
Greatest trick,
Get you to believe
It's-
that it doesn't exist. That's right down their alley.
the greatest
I've used this meme before,
trick
like
the devil
the
ever pulled
weirdo.
Yeah.
was convincing the world he didn't exist.
I like that quote.
Is that Kevin Spacey?
Yeah. From the movie, what was that movie? K-Pax?
K-Pax. Oh, that was a good movie. Whoever's watching
It's a good
watched
movie,
K-Pax. That was good.
Was really good.
It's like you were actually wondering if he was just a crazy person or an alien the whole time.
So he talks about you coming up sometime.
Oh, maybe he deleted the video. I'm not sure.
He's talking
It's
about
possible.
transhumanism. Oh, this looks like your video.
Yeah, maybe it is. Okay, maybe he does discuss my video. I don't know. Somebody sent me the link.
Consciousness into a humanoid robotic body, a transhuman per se, and then after we solve all of this problem on Earth, then we will bring you back and become human again. We will get you back to human, but you will be tricked and led down the wrong path if you
Okay,
don't
he hasn't
understand
made an
what
argument
is
yet.
going on.
Still waiting
in
for
this
an
realm.
argument.
This is why it's so important and why I'm sharing this video. After
Look, he's definitely using footage from your
Yeah, keep
videos.
going. I want to see like
have you
what's he
and
criticizing
something
right now.
Who knows? But that'll be based on how the public reacts to what is going on. They study it. And
Fluoride. I think that is one of the most non-conspiratorial criticisms of our freaking government. Just the fact that they put fluoride in the water. Like, what the heck? That is insane.
Do all countries do that, or is that just our country? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure, but it's crazy. It's crazy.
then they
Okay,
roll
keep
out
going. I
the
haven't heard him make any arguments yet, so maybe he's just
Black
maybe he's just
Gold
commenting.
Project.
on it.
Lady Gaga's awesome.
But you do too. Black Gold Project.
Does he think Lady Gaga is an Illuminati? Holy shit!
I think he thinks Lady Gaga is a demon child, probably, just because this picture. It's ridiculous. That's probably
It's
an
just very
altered
confusing. Holy
picture.
shit.
I know. Lady Gaga's
To
cool.
the average person who hasn't heard this before, but this is nothing new.
Do you like Lady Gaga?
Oh yeah, she's very creative. She
Yeah, I
definitely
love
has talent.
Yeah, she does.
But
I haven't heard a lot from
her.
her. What happened to her? She used to be really popular.
She has lupus, and it gives her a lot of pain.
Oh
She takes ice baths for it. She takes full-on ice baths.
damn!
She posts that on her social media. She's into the treatment. She's into a lot of natural stuff for it too.
Maybe her lupus is just a conspiracy by the Illuminati to sell more CDs. I don't know. Keep going.
Let's talk about people getting a flu shot or getting a avian flu inoculation. There's that you want everybody to have inside their body. It is a millimeter
Lady Gaga.
that is coating the silicon from which you are building a third strand of DNA. The Tea Party, libertarians, it has nothing to do with
is this?
political
Hold on, pause it.
structure or class.
Is this?
They're gonna talk about the 2045 movement
Hold
coming
on.
up.
Is this even like his video, or is he just like shit posting other people's videos? I don't know. Whatever. Keep going. I want to see if he makes an
Yeah.
actual argument.
That is in control.
Skip a little ahead.
Head on the
Skip ahead a
side
little
and-
more.
Thing, which is that's whatever you want. There's a spiritual enemy. There's a physical enemy. They work together in concert in this realm. You don't have to believe that.
I just gotta agree with these people that the 2545 movement is ridiculous. It's so stupid.
Is this Itzkov's movement? Whose movement is this? I think it was Dmitry Itzkov, right? It says Russia. Okay.
To me, what's ridiculous about it is that as soon as you're hooked up to a freaking computer, you just lose so much control. You're at the mercy of whoever is controlling your computer. They can totally alter you. They can switch your personality. They can delete memories. They can freaking
Oh man,
turn
you want like the Russian government like permitting your mind upload? I don't know. My biggest problem with Itzkov is he doesn't have a fucking plan and he doesn't know what he's talking about. Like he's not a scientist. He's just like some rich guy with money who can afford to like make fancy spectacles. But whatever.
Yeah.
Keep going.
New spine, and the more machine I become, the more humane I am. This is what you want to fight for.
What's it to be? Join the evolution of man, or die of the weak.
Here's another clip. Just
Sounds
listen.
based. Based in red pill. I don't see what the problem is here. Holy shit.
And he's entirely in our control.
I've developed an army of soldiers like yourself. Improved, enhanced.
Welcome to the circus. The technology in your veins will make you faster, stronger.
Okay.
Heal you
And?
instantly.
You made
Where's
me,
the argument?
but you can't control me forever.
They'll come for you.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
And again, you may
Like, I'm all for becoming a cyborg. I think that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, that is,
as
is that
long
his
as
entire
as long
argument?
as
His entire argument boils down to Metal Man bad. Why though? Why is Metal Man
Yeah.
bad? Is it because Jesus says so?
yeah.
I mean, like he doesn't actually provide the source in the Bible for where Jesus talks about
Right.
cyborgs or metal people. He talks about like nothing of the sort.
Exactly.
I mean, holy shit! This video has 50,000 fucking views. This guy has 100,000 subs, and his Patreon.
No, this video has 100,000 views, over 100,000,
Holy shit.
104,000 views.
Sorry, 100 patrons. Holy shit! That's right. They're actually grown human beings who think that this boomer has an ascended political take about the technology question. Holy shit!
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
damn. Go to your bookshelf, pick up Martin Heidegger's Question Concerning Technology, and burn that shit. This guy knows what he's talking about. He's got the real argument against technology. Is it the standing reserve, Das Man, ready to hand ontology? All that's fucking trash compared to the genius of Mark fucking Nicholson. Ooh,
I think I know
let's
what's
keep going.
going
Let's
on
keep
here.
going. I want to see if he actually like.
These people are grasping onto the worst parts of technology.
Mhm.
Like these people are not going to be against a prosthetic arm that is, helping someone who has lost an arm. I just know it. These people are not going to be against that. What they're against is like putting chips in the brain that could potentially be
Oh
bad.
yeah, if the government forces you to put chips in your brain, that's obviously bad. I think like 99.99999% of the population would agree with them. So like, why make the video when you're just preaching to the choir. I mean, like,
Mhm.
if you guys want like a good critique of technology, read Ted Kaczynski. So he's like the Unabomber. He went to all these like universities who were like building AI, and he like bombed the shit out of them and killed a bunch of people. And then he kept doing it until they published his manifesto. So he said until they published it, he was going to keep bombing people. So they just fucking published it in a university paper. And it's like 80 pages. The arguments in it are really fucking good. This guy was clearly a genius.
Right.
Like, I know he's a murderer and whatnot, but he murdered people so he could get this information out there. And I think it's a good text. It's really easy to refute the arguments, but the arguments are still pretty good. You know, like they're pretty insightful. Not the like what Kaczynski does is he talks about like what constitutes human nature and how industrial society interferes with that. But it's really good. You have to read the whole thing. Just like you can knock it out in 2 hours tops. But yeah, keep going.
Did you watch Elon Musk's last interview on Joe Rogan? He described the Neuralace like for the first time I've ever heard it described.
I haven't seen it yet. No spoilers.
Okay, it's awesome. That part in particular. I'll just say that he described it in such a way where I would be like, I'll be on board with that. Like, not 100% because it's still scary to have. As long as you still have your whole brain. It's just a little thing on the outside of your head that is transmitting to like a computer. Like that's less scary than like losing your whole mind. You know, like having your whole mind be replaced.
Yeah,
that's what's scary to me.
Don't you
make
the connection?
I don't think he's.
This is what happened to me: is making the connections biblically to what is actually going on in today's world. And I studied many different things: the Quran, New Age, everything, Mormonism, you name it. But only the biblical connects actually what's going on today. It's just understanding that. But I'm going to read to you 2 Thessalonians 2:4. Now, this is, like I said, it's pretty obvious the enemy is telling you exactly
Pause.
what it wants.
Okay. 2 Thessalonians 2:4. Okay, so what does this have to do with transhumanism? This verse is about the Antichrist, who will falsely claim that Christ has returned from the dead. Okay, what does that have to do with technology? Okay, I'm going to try and be charitable. Here's what I think he's talking about. I think he's talking about an AI that we program with the ethics of the Bible, and we program it to be Jesus, and then worship it as Jesus, and then we force you to worship it or we shoot you. I guess maybe then he's making a point, but I don't see what he's trying to say here. Maybe he's saying that. Maybe he's saying that transhumanists literally worship technology as one would worship a deity, but that's like really disingenuous fucking sophistry. And I guess it's like,
right.
If you're here from my like post-humanism video, I'll give you like a very clear definition of what God is. A god is defined as omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient, and transhumanists worship nothing of the sort, because like by definition, you cannot be omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent if you're a person. Like it's just impossible. Literally no one is saying that. So whatever. I mean, he should actually watch the video he's criticizing, because I make that argument at the very end of the video. It's I respond to Yuval Noah Harari, who says like,
I'm not even sure he's criticizing your video.
He's like, Harari asks, is transhumanism turning us into gods? And I respond, no, because gods are omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. You by definition cannot be that because you're a person. And even if you technologically augment yourself, you can't be that. I mean, right. unless you claim you're a subset of God, which is fine. But I don't know. He's attacking a.
I'm not even sure this guy's attacking your video. I haven't heard your voice one time in this video.
Yeah, that's weird.
Says it right here. This is what ultimately the enemy wants: is who opposeth.
Maybe that person who sent you the link. Maybe that person who sent you the link saw some footage from your video in this video and thought that was enough for a reason to censor.
Maybe he mentions it at the end. Keep playing it. Maybe he'll mention it.
Himself above that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. And that's the King James
Cool. What does that have to
Version.
do with
I'll
transhumanism?
read another version. This is the New International Version, NIV.
Yeah.
He will oppose and will exalt
This is like a big, what do you call it, straw man attack
Yeah.
against transhumanism.
himself over everything that is called God or is worship, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. Okay. So
Okay, well, we're not proclaiming
That is
ourselves to be
pretty
God. I just
obvious.
told you. There's three things. Omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence. That was literally in the video he criticized. But yeah, whatever. Keep playing it.
he wants to
Yeah.
set himself up in God's temple. Now you have to ask yourself, where is God's temple? And this is where the massive, massive deception is going on all over the world right now. This verse right here. I'm going to share this with you. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Here's the King James.
You know, it's funny and ironic. A lot of these people who criticize transhumanism are more optimistic about the technology than I am. But they're acting
Okay.
like these people are actually, like, within a short time, these transhumanists are going to have their mind and computers, and it's like, no, like, if that was possible, yeah, it would be great. Like, and acting like, oh, the robots are going to be so
Dude,
advanced, and like,
I wish
no.
technology was advancing at the rate that he thinks it is.
I know.
Okay, I'm looking
I know.
up 1 Corinthians 3:16. And again, it has nothing to do with... Okay, so it's about how Christ's place of worship is decentralized and accessible to all. Like, the church should be... Okay, what does this have to do with technology? It says, do you not know that you are in the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwells within you? Okay. Do you realize that all of you are together are the temple of God and the Spirit of God lives in you? Okay, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think transhumanism has a problem with that. I don't think it's a discussion of technology at all. It's about worship, you know? Okay, whatever. Keep playing it.
Right.
Maybe he'll mention it at the end.
Know
Maybe
ye
he'll
not
clarify.
that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. Another version. Don't you realize that all of you together are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God lives in you?
And?
The enemy is telling you where he wants to set himself up. We,
What?
the people,
The
humanity,
enemy!
that's where
We gotta kill the enemy,
Include-
Roman! The enemy!
I think we found one of the most poor arguments against
How does this have
transhumanism ever.
100,000 views? Whatever, keep playing it. Maybe he redeems himself at the end. Let's see.
I could come up with a much better attack
Oh,
on
yeah.
transhumanism than this
Martin
guy.
Heidegger had tons of attacks on technology that were way better.
I want to say thank you to fellow YouTubers, subscribers, had me on their radio shows, live streams, Patreons that have donated to this ministry. I appreciate you over the years. I'm going to leave you with Hebrews 9:27. And as it is appointed unto men once to die, but after this the judgment.
Oh, see, that's what it comes down to. They want you to die. That's what it comes down to. Because they're thinking, they say, oh no, the transhumanists, they're trying to live forever so they can escape God's judgment.
Okay, so this guy, there are theology
It's
students.
ridiculous.
There are theology students at my university who could take whatever vague narrative he's trying to spin right now and just tear it a new asshole. Like no problem. They will not use lube. Like, if you want to debate like actual Christian theology, I can bring one of my friends on who studies it, and we can have a discussion. Transhumania, Nicholason 98, and he can tell you about like what these verses actually mean. And like, because what he's spinning them as is like, I feel like he's trying to start a cult. He's trying to like get a bunch of like really scared boomers who are like, oh, he's trying to like get them riled up and anxious, and then like he'll lead the way. He'll tell them what to do. Just send me your money. Send me your money, and I'll tell you what to do. It's like how a cult leader talks. Holy shit. But
Right.
yeah, basically, I think I figured out his formula. Step 1, take some random Bible verses. Step 2, remove them from the context in which they occur. Step 3, add obscurantist prose and some postmodern interpretation of the text, and then claim it's actually about technology when the historical condition and material conditions clearly indicate that it's not. Step 4, shout down all opposing interpretations, and step 5, profit. This guy's literally like a grifter who's preying on Christians who haven't read the Bible, and he's like, man, like Pastor Anderson. Listen to like Pastor Anderson if you want like really really passionate like explorations of the text. This guy just kind of like reads it, and he doesn't even explain how it's related to the topic. But I mean, whatever. Keep playing it. Maybe.
That's well said.
And that is a very
It's a
key
total
scripture.
grifter. This guy's a grifter.
A
Holy
lot of
shit.
people ask me,
100,000 views.
So, what's a grifter, anyways? Explain that.
Grifter,
word.
it's kind of like a con man. So you don't actually produce anything. You just like you just rip something off and then like pass it off to your followers and then make money off it, which is basically what he's doing. Like, I don't see any original content. This guy's like pretty talentless. There's no like insightful analysis. There's no original content being created from him. Just kind of like rambling over various videos and movie clips.
Right.
I think it was like Fast and the Furious. What does Fast and the Furious have to do with transhumanism? Like, dude, I mean, it's like like a testosterone fueled action flick. It's not supposed to give some like deep, insightful exploration of how religion should be interpreted. But, I mean, it's really just boomers being offended over things that aren't really offensive. It's like basically like the boomer version of snowflakes.
Look, like we're supposed to be offended that this guy has like super, like this is supposed to be offensive. I mean, I would argue this is maybe not intelligent from a standpoint. I could say, well, maybe someone could hack those arms.
I'd be like, don't amputate your actual arm because the prosthetics today kind of suck. But like, if he was already disabled and he got a prosthetic arm, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, unless someone who's programming the prosthetic arm can hack into it wirelessly and tell the arm to just like start killing you.
Oh yeah, but if it's like hooked up to the neurons rather than some AI on the internet, you have pretty much like good control over it. It's not gonna get hacked.
Yeah, if these technologies were used in the right way, I can see them being very
the
good.
hacking argument. A lot of people misunderstand how computers work and like how vulnerable security systems were in the 90s versus how vulnerable they are today. And they think hackers is just like some guy with a keyboard going like, I'm in. Rather than just like it's more likely to be some guy posing as like an employee of the company who gets the password from you and then gets into the system that way. It's not at all how like movies interpret it. It's like some guy in a hoodie like just typing away on his keyboard, like I'm in through the back door. I'm a hacker. but yeah, whatever. Keep going.
Yeah, totally. Like Neo from the Matrix, the hacker, right? That looks pretty cool.
Is the volume going?
I muted it. Sorry.
And you get your spiritual body in the next
stage
of this journey. This is only one stage.
Rewind back a little bit.
Rewind it. Spiritual body. See, they want you to die. That's what it all comes down to.
Damn, slave morality right here.
Overcome death, and you get your spiritual body in the next stage of this journey.
See, it's all about their afterlife. Like, what about if there is no next stage? What about if there is no spiritual? They're not preparing for that case, the worst case scenario.
So Nicholas, hey man, if you want to be a death cuck and suck the Reaper's dick all day, like be my guest. But let's get the facts straight. The Bible doesn't explicitly ban medicine or lifespan extension. And even though you act like it does, which is again pretty disingenuous, and also people who aren't down with transhumanism are free to do what they want. There's no like authoritarian political ideology being peddled here. It's just the one that exists in your head. And in people who are down with transhumanism, dying as a man is kind of like the point. You're trying to become more than a man. Like a lot of the biohackers alive today want a life expectancy way above the average age of 72. So I'd rather be a transhuman than a dead human. Nothing wrong with that.
Right, and it also doesn't have to be about avoiding the judgment of God either, because you could be a transhumanist but also be a God-fearing person where you're still trying to live your life as though maybe there's a God that could judge you, and a God that can even destroy you and kill you. Like, just because you're alive doesn't mean you don't have to be continuously.
Exactly.
You still might understand that you're still being potentially judged by the God that can turn your power button off and kill you at any time. right?
Yeah.
That the God would have control potentially.
All right, hit play. Let's see.
So
Let's see how he finishes it.
One stage of this journey. It's just like a butterfly. There's a butterfly and there's a caterpillar, but they're the same, but they're two different stages of development, and that is very important. So,
Okay, pause.
in answering,
So, Nicholas, let me explain the human and the transhuman to you in terms you can understand. So, there's a butterfly, right? There's a caterpillar. Think of them as the human and the transhuman. They're at different stages of development, and we call this a haxiety. A haxiety is the gradual transformation of one subject to another subject, and it could take years. It could even take decades. So right now, your ability to form complex thought patterns is determined by your neurons. But one day, you could put maybe synthetic neurons in that'll replicate those internal functions, maybe even enhance them, or perhaps neurons that were damaged by the aging process, like Alzheimer's. This is a great way to prevent your very sense of being from taking a fucking permanent dirt nap, and becoming deconstructed at the molecular level. Like, I've watched it happen to members of my friend's family when I was a very young kid. You know, Alzheimer's is Aubrey de Grey says, like, think of it as a bookshelf with their life experiences fading away like a burning library, like the Library of Alexandria, just gone forever. And it's the most traumatizing thing you'll ever see is watching someone get old and slowly develop dementia from Alzheimer's. So lucky for us, there's some very nice people called transhumanists who are saying, hey, this is fucked up and this should no longer happen. So we're going to take some stem cells, turn them back into neurons, and then put them in grandpa's head so that grandpa will be fine.
Yeah.
You get all, and then you will go to a transhumanist and ask him, please save me for my grand. Maybe these transhumanists, these nice people, will save your boomer ass too. Who knows? Maybe you'll change your mind. Maybe one day we could choose our own life expectancy and die whenever we feel like dying, you know? Doesn't that sound great? Nah, just kidding. That's all fucking Satanism, bro. Satanists. Instead, we need to go back to the good old days where we died of polio and wiped our ass with leaves, you know? So, I mean, I bet Nicholas is probably cool with, like, chemotherapy for cancer, or he's cool with triple bypass surgery for heart disease. But, like, when it comes to Alzheimer's, he's, like, suddenly not cool with, like, Neuralink or neurotechnology being used to treat it. So I don't know if he's, like, a libertarian, but for a supposed libertarian, he sounds a lot like a fascist. So, I mean, if you really hate freedom and hate America, whatever, just saying.
Heck yeah. Well said.
So, what's his conclusion?
That is very important. So, in answering what should we do, keep the faith. Believe on him. That's why he has to return, is to battle what's going on now. That's not your job per se.
See how he phrases everything?
If it's not your job to battle it, then why did you make this video battling it? It's holy shit, completely a self-refuting argument. Go ahead.
And you notice how he phrases everything as if it's like a fact. Like, Jesus is gonna do this, Jesus is gonna do that. Jesus is not a fact.
Yeah.
Jesus is not a fact, nor is it a fact of what Jesus would do and all this stuff. It's like the way they talk. It's like they don't no humility about the possibility.
How does he know? Because, like, what he just described was not specified in Revelations. There's no, like, grand narrative of Jesus battling technology and making us going back to wiping with leaves. And I can just imagine, like, his conception of Jesus is basically like some guy running through hospital beds and, like, fucking disconnecting people who are being hooked up to, like, life-saving technology. Like, I don't know what he's trying to say here. Is he opposed to the biotechnology, the nanotechnology, the neurotechnology, or just all of it? He never specifies.
Right. Plus, he's disobeying Jesus anyways, because Jesus supposedly said, "He who keeps my saying will never see death." So this guy's acting like he's going to die, and they have therefore disobeyed Jesus' saying. Because if you die according to Jesus, you disobeyed his saying.
Yeah, so Nicholas, like, what if one day you get Alzheimer's, and then because of the dementia, you no longer know who Jesus is anymore, let alone form coherent sentences about Jesus? So, I mean...
Yeah.
You're to tell of the kingdom to come. You tell of who he is and what he's about and what he showed us. But going up to the Capitol, burning crosses and violence or whatever. That's not what we were told to do. Is to keep the faith of what's to come. Because here's the thing. If you die tomorrow and you believe in Jesus Christ,
if you die tomorrow, then you failed, and according to Jesus, you didn't even obey his saying. That's what it is.
Yes.
And you're a loser.
Boy,
Dead loser.
Appreciate you guys. Love you.
You win. Pause it. Woo! Woo! Looks like we got a winner, guys. I mean, like Nicholson's brain's sure it's been ravaged by Alzheimer's, and he can't even read the Bible anymore. But he won, guys. He won because at least he didn't use the fucking Alzheimer's preventing technology, or the neurotechnology, or the Neuralink, or the fucking prosthetic arm. You know, at least he didn't touch any technology, so he's remained pure. But like, hey, just between you and me, like as a representative for the rest of humanity who is watching your video, and the rest of Rowan's channel who is watching your video, I think head to the nearest thermometer, break the thermometer, and drink the mercury inside, because you're not guaranteed death from drinking that mercury, but you are guaranteed a neurodegenerative disease. Like, probably for sure, drinking mercury will like do that to you. But if you think your neurons will just fuck off to another dimension to be with Jesus, then why don't you do it? Like, put your money where your mouth is and drink the fucking thermometer if you don't think that Alzheimer's is going to destroy your identity. Like, people with dementia are half alive and half dead because half their fucking neurons are gone. Did the half of the Alzheimer's patient like run off to another dimension to like have fun with Jesus while the other half stayed on Earth? Did you just split a person in half and like imagine living your life like half present here and half present in heaven? Do you actually believe that's how it works? Because there's 2.2 billion Christians on this planet, and we believe in the same religion you do. But even then, we're not gonna like neglect our health. And we're actually going to try and extend our lifespans because that's like what we do throughout all of human history. So, I mean, we're going to at least try and somewhat improve civilization. And you don't have to join us if you don't want to. But at least for us, Nicholson, please just pick up that thermometer and become a winner. Become a winner.
Well said.
Did he even, like, okay, so I'm going to talk to this guy on Twitter because he didn't really mention my video. Unless he mentioned it at the beginning. Scroll back to where the video first shows up. Right there, at the 2 minutes in. The very start. Maybe he mentions why he's using the video. I want to know if he mentions me by name, because I'd gladly like debate this guy. I actually have read the Bible, so like I can hold my own in a debate about whatever.
Have you read the whole Bible?
Yeah. As a teenager.
Wow. Have you read the whole Art of War?
Oh yeah, that's a good book. We should do a stream on that book. Just the first 5 chapters, because later on it just gets into like battle tactics. But like the first few chapters is actually like really good philosophy for how to succeed in life.
Wow, I want to read it.
Yeah, go a little.
I heard about it so many times.
A little bit further ahead.
We need to use the Art of War against death and aging.
Yeah, play it here. Play it back there. We missed that part.
Radio waves don't exist. No, they
a minute earlier.
Exist. You have to just tune
a minute earlier.
I saw something.
Just like the spiritual.
Actually, 2:30. It's 2:30.
What you want. But
2:30.
Yeah.
Then you miss a lot of information.
Was that Aldous Huxley?
The Bible.
Yeah, just play it. The tinfoil hat.
12.
Tinfoil hat.
We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers
right before
of the
that.
darkness of
Right
this
before
world, against spiritual. What's going on?
We're here.
Around you.
Actually, just leave it.
Hidden realm, spiritual realm. So, the other thing is they want to. All right, want you fighting against each other, so you don't understand.
What are you looking for exactly?
Yeah, just let it play. I want to see if he mentions me by name.
Person, I call it.
If he's like calling me out on a debate or something.
Is standing in the corner that poked the stick at both sides, that are watching you.
Oh shit, dude! Pause it. Oh shit! Oh my god! What does that say? Ah yes, Georg Friedrich Wilhelm Hegel, the notorious international state sponsor of Islamic jihadi terrorism, Holy shit, dude. That's not what the Hegelian dialectic means. Oh. Ah. Like as Hegel writes on page 1 of the Phenomenology of Spirit, Salam alaikum, brothers. We shall observe the Kufar infidels destroy each other and watch from the corner of the spiritual realm. By Allah, you will taste my shoe, you son of 6,000 whores. Holy shit, dude. Oh my God. What does he think we are? He says, repressive state police, terrorist threat, removal of freedoms. Oh my God. Okay, you heard it here, folks. Nicholson, 1968, will complete the system of German idealism. Holy shit. Okay, so, that's not what the dialectic is. I'm going to explain what it is. So, the dialectic is a unity of opposites. So you know how earlier we were talking about dialetheia? There are true contradictions. That's what Hegel's saying, is that in reality, we observe true contradictions. We observe emergent properties coming from two contradictory things that resolve themselves. And there's no you can't just take any three things and say thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and say that's Hegel. He's talking about a very specific thing, things that are opposites and merge together. So there's a guy on YouTube. His name's Gregory Sadler. You can pull him up on Google Images. And he has a PhD in philosophy, and he will, like Nicholson, he will literally read Hegel to you page by page and explain every fucking paragraph. So check it out. You'll find that the dialectic isn't some conspiracy theory to commit false flag terror attacks or whatever this diagram he made is indicating. Holy shit, that's so funny. I'm going to screenshot this. Hang on. Screenshot. That's funny. That's super funny.
Another stream we should have one time is about is Jesus a historical fact or not? Because I was
that's a great debate. We could talk about C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis whole book about that.
Right, a lot of people think that Jesus is maybe made up, almost like mythology. So I'd want to know. I want to see the evidence of that. Is Jesus a fact? Is Jesus actually happen for sure? Was there a Jesus, or is it totally made up? What's the truth there? We need to figure that out.
Yeah. Have you ever seen did you actually watch Man from Earth?
Mm-mm.
I think it's on YouTube. It's that movie Gennady recommended you while you were interviewing him. That's a really that's a really great movie about what Jesus could be and why people might have perceived him that way.
Right. All right. I guess this is
that's it.
End it, huh?
Any more questions we should answer before we shut it down?
Let's see. What do we got here? Oh yeah,
a couple more.
Take a jab at any of those you want.
Sure. Let's see. Josu Olivas says, "What's your take on the chip? Even though I don't think we need it for eternal life, we all." Oh, okay, so the chip. Zoltan Istvan, he did it as a publicity stunt. He put a chip in his hand so he could open his car. It's literally just a demonstration of how advanced computer chips are, that you could put them in people and make them do things. But it's not necessary for life extension. I don't have any chips in me. I don't think I'd take any unless they provided some kind of, maybe if they took medical data and then beamed that to my phone and then told me if I had kidney cancer, maybe you could pee on your phone, a strip on your phone, and it'll tell you if you have cancer or something. That'd be pretty cool.
I could see that being very, very valuable. That's a chip I might even want.
Yeah, there's
a medical chip.
There's ways in which you can use chips to enhance your life expectancy. Sal says, "Did you know that the Japanese wind god Fujin is based off the ancient Greek goddess Boreas? Same goes for Vajrapani, the protector of Buddha, based off Hercules." Yeah, it's very interesting. If you look at the polytheistic pantheons, from all the way from Japan to Ireland, it's the same few gods. You have a thunder god, you have a god of gods, who's everyone's daddy. You have a god of wisdom. It's really interesting. All the parallels. Religion definitely isn't a boring subject. It tells you a lot about humanity and the way they migrated. Because by studying the religions of these people, you can tell where they came from, and where they came from geographically, what their language was, where their cities were. A lot of interesting information you can find. Josu Oliva says, "Hey, Eternal Life fan. I was an Eternal Life fan before I met you. And I saw you here, and I understood what you meant by it." Yeah, me too. So I saw like Michio Kaku's immortality video, and I stumbled upon your page, and I was like, "Oh, there's other people talking about this like life extension thing." And then I eventually I started on your Facebook page, and then came to your YouTube page.
You found
Facebook page first.
a quote by that guy on my Facebook page?
Michio Kaku, I saw a video by him called "Can We Reverse Aging?" and then I saw him on your channel or your Facebook channel, and then from there I found your YouTube, and then I also found Isaac Arthur.
Wow.
So Isaac Arthur was a huge influence too. The style in which I do videos is from Isaac Arthur, but the subject of the videos is inspired by your channel.
Awesome.
But yeah, I think that's all the questions.
So cool. All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for coming, everyone in the chat. And make sure you go subscribe to Alex. I'll put his link right here on the screen. Go subscribe.
May you live forever.
May you live forever. Death to the Reaper.
And Nicholson will complete the system of German idealism. Peace.
Make America live
Make
forever.
America live forever.
Peace out, everyone. Good night, Alex. It's good having you on.
Great to be on.